from where I last left off. Next on this list of the many animes of top five, or should I say, the top five of many animes considered the greatest of all times of animes, is on this list. This is my number two, and my number two on this list could also be my number one. It really depends on the situation. It really depends on the time of day. It really depends on um, the mood that you're in. But this anime cannot fall anywhere from the first, second, or third place. There's no way this anime could be any less than in the third place of the top anime of all times. If it's not the first place, it's the second place. If it's not the second, it's the third. If it's not the third, it's the first place. This anime is one of the greatest anime of all time, if not the greatest anime of all time. It's typically always in the top two of all animes of all time. It's been on um, television for as long as I can remember for the past 10 years, um, and plus on Japanese television. And I believe it's been on for more than 8 years on American television. Toonami, so on, so Funimation, that type of things. But this is One Piece, and One Piece is very different from Hunter x Hunter. And the reason why it's in second place because One Piece doesn't take itself as serious as Hunter x Hunter. Sometimes you want things to be grounded. Sometimes you want things to be up in the air. Sometimes you want things to be Dragon Ball Z level. Sometimes you want it not to. Because if you become too convoluted with content that are continuously the same repetitive thing over and over again, things get dull over time. And unfortunately, Dragon Ball Z and One Piece and Naruto eventually falls into this category of things sometimes being repetitive that becomes toxic over time. In all truth, One Piece really should have been 800 episodes in total before it concluded, or before it's supposed to conclude. I believe the maximum amount of episodes that One Piece should have had is a full 1,000 episodes. No more, no less. Everything that's been past, I believe everything past its its 600th episode started to become convoluted content. Um, Episodes unrelated to the main plot, episodes unrelated to the main story. Yes, everyone could have little pastimes or little monster of the week or content of the week or content of the month. Those things are short-term players. Um, that is something that every type of story have. Unfortunately, when those short-term things become so long that it becomes annoying, you sometimes wonder why it exists, and sometimes certain arc don't hit the mark that you wonder why it existed from the beginning. The mermaid arc, I didn't like that, and as well as the arc associated with Morai, or Moray, however you want to call it. Undead is great. Zombies are great. Um, but when the characters, you hardly remember any of the characters from there and the actions for which they're supposed to be taking to accomplish their mission in order to get to the One Piece. You sometimes wonder that pit stop they make against one of the warlords. Was that even really necessary? Throughout the entire One Piece story, yes, to fight the warlord is something, and it's very interesting. But to take the warlord as a joke and to take the enemies that are served under the warlord as kind of a joke kind of makes you wonder if the so-called greatest warriors of the sea are actually the greatest warriors of the sea at all. The whole existence of that type of warlord kind of dumbed down the effect of their idea of what is actually a good anime versus what is a bad anime. So it really started from him, and as much as I liked his character, I really believe that's a hit and miss with regards to story content later on in One Piece. And Naruto suffered from this more than anything because Naruto doesn't know how to keep things balanced in check. And eventually, when it starts to lose its audience, it went towards the whole repetitive and throwback and reminding people of the lives of each of the individuals and what they did in order to delay time. because obviously Naruto was going to come to an end within the manga and Boruto was going to start, and they decided to extend and milk the cow for all it's worth, which you should never do. You should never do in anything. You should never milk anything for all it's worth. For all it's worth, it's an example of futility, and it's an example of failure. When you hear anyone say that, it's an indication that it's time to check out. Whether it's a movie, whether it's a television show, if someone says that, and it's not something that's connected towards milking the cow for all it's worth in a good sense, and milking the cow for all it's worth in a bad sense, it's never going to work. In fact, in a good sense and in a bad sense, when you use the word milking the cow, it's an indication that things aren't working out the way that they should have. And I hate when people use it, and they use it in the television show Supernatural. I think one of the main actors of that show had said this, and because they realized the fandom is the one that kept them going, they use the word milk on the cow for all it's worth. Now, that is only something you could do when the fandom is what's keeping your show running. You cannot use that when the general audience already checked out. Only when the fandom is still there and willing to make the content go forward. If the fandom checks out as well as the general audience, and you're milking the cow for all it's worth, or at least half of your fandom left and the general audience, and you're milking the cow for all it's worth, and you failed. That's why Naruto could never be in my top 3, because it doesn't understand that. Moving forward from this, we're now in One Piece, and each of these characters in One Piece are part of that milking the cow for all it's worth, but at the same time are the opposite of that, contradiction to that. It's the existence of each of these individuals and the attachment that people have to each of these individuals have made One Piece exist and live on far longer than any other show on television history in anime form. It's not that the powers that they have, it's not the general story, because the story of Naruto and the story of Hunter x Hunter are better stories. It's more than that in One Piece. It's kind of this brotherhood, this family that's more strong in One Piece than it ever would be in Hunter x Hunter or in Naruto. And yes, some people say that's impossible. The brotherhood in Naruto is stronger than any other anime. But you have to understand, a brotherhood in something is all aspects of the word brotherhood. If the brotherhood is attachment towards dealing with suffering, that's one aspect. If the brotherhood is attachment to dealing with joy, that's one aspect. If the brotherhood is dealing with towards family, that's an aspect. If the brotherhood is dealing towards accomplishment of a certain task, that's another aspect. All forms of brotherhood, sisterhood, familyhood has to be associated with the characters themselves and with each character attached to each other. Once any form of that brotherhood breaks off, the weakest link, that the anime as a whole is inferior to others under the word brotherhood. That said, during the process of Naruto, and during the process of One Piece, and during the process of Dragon Ball Z, those chains start to become weak in those animes. And that's the main difference between One Piece and other animes. Those chains are still strong with One Piece. And that's the only reason why One Piece can be considered either the primary first greatest anime of all time, or it's the secondary greatest anime of all time. And it really is up to you as an individual to choose One Piece as your first or as your second greatest anime. It's really based on preference. But if you don't have One Piece in your top 3, I believe you don't have anything or any right to talk about anime at all in any shape or form without actually watching One Piece. You don't know really anything about anime until you watch One Piece. You don't really know anything really about anime until you watch Gintama. You don't really know anything about anime until you watch something like Dragon Ball Z. All of my top 5 animes are associated with a different aspect of anime. And about the only type of anime that I would say that my top 5 does not focus on is the dark and the depressing, or the gloomy, or the the meant for adults only type one. Like say Monster, for example. Monster would never be in my top five because as great as Monster is, as great as Death Note is, they deal with the more dark aspects of humanity. And they are associated with one type of anime fans, those with more mature minds to deal with mature content. Look, Hunter x Hunter is not made for children, but Hunter x Hunter can be dealt with children with parental supervision. Same as Death Note can be. However, Death Note deal with more the dark side of humanity more than anything. My top five are all associated with that borderline between dark and between good. It's not about crossing completely over to the dark side and telling a story from the dark side. It's about the two paths, the two sides of the coin. If your anime is purely focused on one aspect of humanity to tell a story, then your anime is only on that aspect of humanity to tell a story. Yes, Death Note would have been in my top five as one of my top five, but I realized Death Note lacked something, a sense of humanity to it. It only had a sense of camaraderie within its brotherhood, but it didn't have a sense of humanity to it. It had aspects of humanity, but not a sense of humanity. And even though it had that type of brotherhood to it, it brotherhood wasn't to that level of Naruto. It brotherhood wasn't to that level of One Piece. It it brotherhood wasn't to that level of Dragon Ball Z, including its content and what it was trying to sell to its audience. It didn't have that gusto. It didn't have that fun factor. It didn't have that I need this in my life every day in my life. You don't walk around telling yourself, I'm feeling down today, so let me go watch some Death Note, you know? Unless you're that type of person that requires dark anime in order to make yourself good, which majority of people do not, those type of animes can never truly be in a top five. So moving on from that, just to emphasize that point, individual characteristics and personal liking out the door, I'm moving on. Because this anime isn't about what I feel to be my personal anime top five of my second of the personal top five. This is basically an evaluation based on everything everyone have ever said with regards to what is the greatest anime of all time. And I've simply assessed all those things in order to characterize all the different animes to see which one is the top five. And then I added my personal opinion based on what I preferred as a top five in comparison to others. So it's basically an assessment based on most people's idea of what a top five is. And this is in my top five, and it's my number two. So the story of One Piece begins. We have our main three protagonists here, and in the end, the story of those main three protagonists becomes main five protagonists. In truth, it's more like main four protagonists. The others are simply kind of feel like they're along for the ride, but it's more like a brotherhood. I believe if Chopper wasn't in the anime, it wouldn't feel like One Piece. He has become an essential component of One Piece. But I believe if Chopper wasn't in the anime would have still lasted for as long as it did, up to a certain point. That is, yeah, probably wouldn't have gone beyond 1,000 episodes. And I believe as well Sanji, if Sanji wasn't in the show, um, the anime would still last for a long time. But at the same time, I believe without Sanji, this anime would have died a long time ago. So Sanji is one of the top four. In fact, this brotherhood really falls within the line of four essential characters: Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Sanji. And Usopp and Chopper later on become part of the gang and became essential parts of the gang. Same as Brook, same as Nico Robin, same as Chopper. So, in some sense, the secondary characters that aren't primary characters are even more important than the primary characters, to the fact that the secondary characters eventually became primary characters later on in certain seasons. I believe by the time season 3 came about, Nico Robin was already part of the primary characters and she was never secondary anymore. So yeah, it's hard to call secondary characters secondary anymore in One Piece. They all seem to be primary characters. They all basically just showed up at a different period throughout anime. This anime basically have multiple protagonists, but it's all told from the point of view of one protagonist, or it's all fashioned around the point of view of one protagonist, which is Luffy. He is the main protagonist, but it feels like the anime has multiple protagonists in certain aspects in certain arcs. So starting off from the beginning, we have in the first place here, this image is of Luffy, Zoro, and Nami. And like I said, this could be your number one anime. This is my number two, but this could be your number one anime because it really falls into the number one slot, to be honest with you. Moving on from that, we then go into the next scene. So I'm taking this everywhere from all the way from season one, very first episodes, and going all the way to the last episode, episode 1073. So yeah, this is going to be a long one, probably more than 2 hours. If you're along for the ride, my name is Magheed. Should have said that before, but I'm not going to describe anything else. I do manga, I do anime, and I do games. So without further ado, because this is going to be a long one, this is One Piece. And this is the journey of One Piece and why it is the greatest anime of all times. To many people. To me, it is the second. But it is kind of considered a rival to my first. In fact, on certain days I refuse to watch Hunter x Hunter. And I only want to watch Hunter x Hunter. In fact, certain months I refuse to watch Hunter x Hunter and I only want to watch One Piece. So they're both rivals. They're both in a race. And they're both like Gon and Killua crossing that finish line on the first Hunter exam. It's hard to say which of them is the best. And many people say that's easy, One Piece is bad. It really isn't. One Piece don't go to that level of seriousness like Hunter x Hunter does. One Piece don't have that type of individual brotherhood that that Hunter x Hunter had. Hunter x Hunter's brotherhood is somewhat different. And attachment to these characters are very different. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to say it's up to you to choose which one is your number one or your number two. And which one falls in the line between all aspects of anime, all aspects of drama, all aspects of comedy, all aspects of film directing, film animation, cut scenes, drop shadows, scene transition, movement, actions, character behavior, character moments, character transitions, animation, clothes, designs, fashion, everything you could possibly think of that's necessary to make a film or in order to make a cartoon or in order to make any product from beginning point to end point. So I've considered all those things when I'm watching all these different animes. What can people tolerate to a certain degree before it becomes convoluted? So this is One Piece, and the next episode, or should I say the next scene here, the next image here, is Nami stealing from inside of a ship. This is all within episode 1. This guy catches her. She's trying to play it off like she's a pirate. She's wearing pirate outfit. She's just generally a thief. She's not a pirate at the moment. Going from that, we then meet the first protagonist of the story, which is the primary protagonist. There are many protagonists, but this is the primary protagonist. People say, no, there's only one protagonist. No, there's many. But this is the primary protagonist. Luffy is very much, well, it's really hard to say. Secondary protagonists, I guess you could call it that. They are all secondary protagonists. They're not really secondary backup dancers or secondary characters. They feel like a protagonist that would go on to take the spot of the main protagonist. If the protagonist ever bit the bullet, that's what they feel like. And this is Luffy. He's on the ship. He wants to become a pirate. He was hiding inside of a barrel. He only did so because he wanted to set sail on the high seas. And the story doesn't tell off his age from why he's on the ship at this age, but it's assumed that his story already started like a long time ago. And we, the viewer, first seeing it within the first episode thinking this is the first time he's going on an adventure. No, this dude has gone on many adventures, um, even when he was far younger. We're just seeing him for right now, on the ship, hiding out inside of a barrel, and then got caught. The next scene we see is Luffy taking out his first adversary within this anime. I forgot her name, but it's not important. Um, it should be, but it's not important. He took out this woman who's a pirate who took over the ship. Basically, the first introduction of piracy in this anime is within the very first episode. This is a random ship with random people on it, have their jewels and everything stolen by pirates. The pirate came to rob the booty, to take the alcohol, to take everything, because that's what pirate does. Luffy took the pirate out, and the first introduction of his abilities is he took the pirate out using his stretch Armstrong ability, the Gum Gum Fruit, what he ate. So we are first introduced to his powers firsthand. We're not going to get backstory of how he got them. We're just thrown into the mix, and we have to accept that he has powers from the very beginning, from the very first episode. The next scene we move into is the next episode, I believe, is where we meet the guy called Warlord Zorin. Probably butcher that, so I'll just call him Zoro, because everyone does. Zoro, which he actually looks like Zoro without the face mask. He wears the Zoro headband, he carries a sword like Zoro, but he doesn't cover his eyes like Zoro. So he's strung up and is going to be executed by Marine HQ, possibly for crimes or something. But what it is he's like a bounty hunter. Similar to a bounty hunter, he's a hunter who hunts pirates. He's a pirate hunter. And his job was to hunt pirates. Apparently he got captured and he's left for dead. Luffy managed to free him. The kid says, well, listen, why are you freeing this guy? He hunts people like you, Luffy. You're a pirate. And Luffy said he doesn't care about that. What they're doing to this guy is they're making him suffer. So Luffy knocks out the dude, who's laughing at the fact that Zoro's going to get killed. And Luffy said, I can't stand people like you. And another emphasis on Luffy's character is that this character can go from goofy to serious in a heartbeat. He knocks out the dude. The dude whines and says his father's going to pay him back. His father works for Marine HQ. He says, I don't give a damn who your father is, blah, blah, blah. His father shows up. His father is Moi. I am John Moi, or however you want to call him. Says, I'll kick your ass. Luffy says, you could go ahead and try it. Luffy does kick his ass. He then says he'll come back and take revenge on the people who are there. He's very much a tyrant type. Eventually, he even took his own son, who Luffy knocked out in a bar, and says, I don't give a damn that you're my son. You're a weakling, spineless coward. I'm going to kill you in order to get away, because even though this guy works for Marine HQ, he's pretty much a villain in the story. So he took his sword, used his own son as a shield, and that's the end of that story. The next scene we see, or the next episode follows, Nami tried to do even more for stealing. She hasn't become one of the Straw Hat Pirates yet, but she's doing even more stealing. Eventually, she gets caught up, or she didn't get caught, but she get caught up, discovered, and on a piece of paper, the map that she needed to go to the Grand Line turns out to be a map of a bounty of a guy named Buggy. And Buggy happens to be a pirate, a real silly name, but he's one of the most entertaining characters of all of One Piece. In fact, he's probably the most entertaining character in all of One Piece. It's so ridiculous to the fact that it becomes hilarious. And he got his own, I believe he got a spin-off, or he got multiple episodes that emphasize his existence relating to another character called Shanks. But more on that later. Moving on from that, we get to see a backstory with regards to the first backstory of Luffy is when he was a kid and trying to drink beer. Eventually, he couldn't drink the beer because he's a kid, so he asked for juice, or should I say Shanks gave him juice. He said, thank you for juice. They start to laugh at him. He says, what pirate drinks juice? He says, stop laughing at me. I'm going to be king of pirates. You'll wait and see. They all laugh about it. Shanks is humoring him, even though Shanks love him, because Shanks is like Luffy's dad. And here's where things get very, very strange. And it's important that I emphasize this more than anything right now, because this will pop up later on, coming towards the end of this video. Something called the devil fruit, which is the gum gum fruit which he ate to become elastic, was locked in a box. And no one was able to open it, or no one was told to open it, because Shanks was the leader of the pirates, so no one would dare to open it anyway, otherwise than face his wrath. Or maybe the box couldn't be opened by anyone, including him. It was never emphasized that the box was able to be opened. It was only assumed that Shanks got it, put it in the box, done deal. No one touches it. In this anime, I'm going to make a prediction. And it's probably going to be a good prediction. It's probably going to be a bad prediction. I believe, going all the way to episode 1073, after seeing episode 1073, I believe the devil fruit was calling to Luffy. It was very much intended to fall into Luffy's hand. Not by Shanks, but simply because it wanted to find Luffy. It was very much like the ring from Saruman. It needed to find a host because it wanted to go back to its master. It's very much like that. But it's not toxic, wicked to that level that it's a precious. It's not that type of thing. It simply is a thing attached to someone whose will is so powerful and so potent that it's a mirror image of what it's supposed to represent. So in some cases, it probably opened the box. The devil fruit probably opened the box itself and presented itself to Luffy, even though the box was closed or locked. The anime did say the box was closed and locked, but it's unknown whether it was really locked from the beginning, or whether Shanks put it there just next to Luffy simply so he could open it. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's simply called to Luffy. If the fact that Shanks intended Luffy to become the devil fruit, then Shanks as a character might not be as good as people think that he is. But I don't think that's the case. I think the box called to Luffy, that devil fruit, and that's why I'm going on about this, is the mystery of the gum gum fruit is attached to the One Piece. The name and title of this anime is called One Piece. And the One Piece is a thing that everyone wants to attain more than anything in the world. Even if a person does not want to become the king of the pirates, or the king of anything, or the emperor or ruler of the world, they all want to attain One Piece. I believe this gum gum fruit is attached to the One Piece, not in the sense that everyone knows it's attached to One Piece in some way or shape or form. I believe it's an essential component of the One Piece, and it's not told to us, or it's kind of like a herald of Galactus, if anyone reads comics. Very much like that. I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but I'm just spitballing right now. So moving on from that, so I could get back into the anime, we get to see Buggy for the first time. And Buggy is the second villain within the story that we get to see. Luffy meets Buggy. Buggy says, I am going to attain One Piece. What a little punk like you need with One Piece. I'm going to be the king of the pirates one day. Luffy said, how can a red-nosed guy like you that look like a clown ever be, the leader of anything? And Buggy he sounds like a clown. He behaves like a clown, but he's vicious like a pirate. This is a very entertaining character, and he will become even more entertaining as things goes on. Eventually, Luffy defeats him. Eventually, time passes. Eventually, Nami, doing her Nami stuff, starts stealing more. Eventually, Luffy gets to know who Nami is and asks for her recruitment into achieving his own personal goals as becoming a member on her ship. She kind of denies at the moment, but she needs to acquire a certain amount of money to free your people from a dictator called Arlong. And we then go from Luffy fighting Buggy straight into Arlong's little arc. And Arlong is someone after she gets captured, after Luffy gets captured by Buggy, and after Nami gets captured by Buggy, or more like Nami shows up after Luffy gets captured, and she tells Buggy she'll help him out in order to acquire what he wants. But in all truth, Nami wants to acquire the amount of money to free up people. Moving on from that, Zoro says, "No, screw this. I'm gonna take down this guy Buggy." He gets into a conflict with Buggy. Doesn't realize Buggy have eaten the devil fruit as well, and eventually Buggy kicks his ass. But eventually, at the same time, Luffy, uh, I guess he recovers, and then he kicks Buggy's ass, and that's the end of Buggy. Moving on from that, we then see another character by the name of Usopp. So before we even get to the whole story of Arlong, we then get to Usopp. A little story here. He's the next character that's going to be important for future stories, but he's one of the crew of the Straw Hat crew on the ship called Mary, which Luffy has managed to attain either by theft or by, well, whatever means he attained the Mary. I forgot how he attains the ship called the Mary. Um, Moving on from that, Usopp is then seen hiding out from some guys because he's going after this girl, because he's friendly with this rich girl who's part of a mansion, is part of a great family, who has lots of money, and it's assumed that he wants to rob this girl, but it turns out this girl has been a friend of his since they were childhood. Usopp gets into conflict with a guy, I forgot his name, but his powers, his ability, I could never forget the name of his one of his ability. It's called Pussy Feet, or Pussy Foot. It's the dumbest name for a power, so I could never forget his power or who he was, because he had one of the stupidest name for an ability. It's actually hilarious to think about it. So once she discovers that his butler, and she was his butler, is a bad guy, she decides to step it up a notch and defend Usopp, who is her childhood friend. And even though everyone shits on Usopp and says you're trying to be a pirate is our bad guys, stop pretending to be a pirate. He did this all the way from a kid to when he became a teenager, in order just to have fun with her, because I believe her parents died, her mother and her father died, and the only person that was taking care of her was this was her attendants, the butler, the maids, everyone were surrogate parents to her, because she was the lord of the manor, or the mistress of the manor, after they died. Unfortunately, this butler wanted to attain all her riches for himself, because in hindsight, or more like in hidden, or pretentious, he was, well, pretentious is not the word, pretending. He was pretending to be a good guy, but he was actually another pirate. And this pirate eventually um, made blades come out of his hands, took out Usopp pretty quickly. Eventually, he didn't kill Usopp. He was because Usopp was rescued by Luffy. Luffy knocks him out. Eventually, Luffy gets in battle with the first. I would say this was the first ever difficult opponent he fought. Yes, Buggy was difficult because Buggy ate the devil fruit, but Buggy wasn't one of those pirates that you would consider to be serious when it comes to wanting to actually kill people. Buggy was more like the pirate that would kill someone simply if they piss him off too much. This guy, on the other hand, was a person who killed people on the regular just because he could. So he would. This was the first time things really took like a serious notion with regards to the type of people Luffy was fighting. He's not the strongest opponent Luffy has ever fought, but he's one of the worst opponents Luffy has fought, because he was willing to kill Usopp. He's willing to kill the girl. He's willing to kill the girl's attendants, entire everyone within the family, within the mansion, including the bodyguards, the door guards, the dogs. He was willing to kill everyone with the pirates he was associated with in order to claim the riches of the girl's house. Eventually, Luffy defeats him. He gets taken out. Luffy headbutts him, kick his ass, and that's the end of him. And that's the end of Usopp's little story with regards to that guy. Completely forgot his name, but I didn't forget the name of his ridiculous powers. The next scene we are introduced to is Sanji. The weird part is I always thought that Usopp's little story came after Sanji, but Sanji's story came actually after Usopp's story. Sanji is a cook. Sanji is not a pirate. Sanji's a cook. Sanji works within the Grand Canal, if I remember clearly, on a ship that's docked somewhere within the Grand Canal. And he works there since he was a kid, doing dishes until he became a cook. And eventually he became great and famous at cooking that it was so essential towards the component of everything of his arc later on within One Piece. And in many of his battles, it's an emphasis of how he became strong and how he became who he is and what he offers to the table in regards to the straw hat and being on the merry. So Sanji meets this guy. This guy says he's starving. He's part of Don Krieg's people. Sanji doesn't know he's part of Don Krieg's people until later on. Don Krieg's, I'm not sure how Don Krieg's name was, but I could never forget the guy. I forget everyone bad guy's name. If I forget a bad guy's name, it's because that bad guy wasn't that memorable. Don Kreese, however, was someone who's very memorable because the dude literally walk around with, I believe cannons in his shoulders, in his armor, and his armor was fully made out of gold. And he was one of the most, annoying, but at the same time, one of the most baddest bosses in all of One Piece, even though he's a weakling boss compared to many bosses in One Piece. So Sanji then meets Nami for the first time, and Sanji is a lovesick guy. He falls in love with any woman that's pretty, in all truth. I don't believe Sanji is in love with any woman whatsoever at all. I think that's just part of his behavior. If he finds a beautiful woman, he's willing to give her a flower and says, I'm in love with you. I don't think he's in love with anyone whatsoever. I just think that's part of his character. I believe it's just a mirage to hide who he really is. Because he does this to every woman that's beautiful. That said, moving on from that, we get to finally meet Don Kreese, and this guy's hilarious. This guy's awesome. This guy's one of the best bad guys in all of One Piece history because he was not that strong of a bad guy from the beginning. But at the beginning of the anime, when you first meet Don Kreese, you think, well, this guy's awesome. He has freaking cannons within his shoulders, his armors. He has cannons within his chest, cannons within his stomach. His arm can turn into cannons. This guy was a walking, Iron Man suit before Iron Man was even a thing. And so Luffy had trouble fighting him because Don Kreese's armor didn't only shoot stuff as well. Don Kreese's armor was completely invincible. And it was hard even with Luffy's gum hands to actually knock this guy out because he had to break through the armor in order to defeat this guy. He got us a couple of hits on him physically in the face, but it was always his armor protecting him from getting completely knocked out in the face as well. And obviously, since Luffy is, even though he's made out of rubber, however, his internal organs and everything aren't made out of rubber. They just stretch. So no matter how hard he stretches his body or how far he stretches his body, even though his organs and his bones and everything can be stretched, there's still bones at the end of the day, and there's still organs at the end of the day. They're just stretchable. So if bullets pierce through them, he still takes damage internally, regardless if they're stretchable. They're not invincible, they're just stretchable. So he takes a lot of bullet damage, it goes down, and eventually he almost dies. And Zoro has told him, listen, I'll take down this guy Don Kreese for you, but you must help me to defeat someone for me, or at least help me to find someone for me, and I'll finally join and be part of your Straw Hat ship and be one of your crew members if you help me to find this guy, which is one of the warlords of the sea. He's responsible for things that happened to me in my youth, and if I finally take down this guy, I could be the most famous pirate hunter of all times. because this guy, the most famous pirate hunter of all times, is not only carrying a legendary sword, but is also a legend. I believe this guy was a pirate hunter before he ever became a hunter, or the most powerful swordsman in history before he became a pirate warlord. So it's essential in Zoro's arc to find this warlord. One of the main, there are 7 warlords. So by defeating this warlord, he could finally be at peace and say, well, I've accomplished my goal in life. So it's essential towards Zoro's arc that he finds his character, and it's essential towards Zoro's arc that Luffy helps him to find this warlord. So during the combat with with Don Kreese, Zoro helped him out. I believe Usopp helped him out as well, and Sanji helped him out as well. Sanji gets his ass kicked, however, as well as Zoro, because we're fighting a guy who's basically shooting bullets out of his shoulders, out of his chest, out of his arms like Gatling guns. It doesn't matter how fast you are, how strong you are, eventually you catch a couple of bullets in you. And Don Kreese basically is a walking Gatling gun in his arms and shoulders and everything. And he carries explosive rounds as well. So yeah, he was one of probably the first hardest boss Luffy has ever fought. Buggy wasn't that hard. The guy before that wasn't that hard. The first pirate they came out against wasn't that hard. The first ever difficult boss Luffy ever fought in One Piece, that was, I guess you could consider to be very difficult for Luffy to survive and to thrive against, was the guy called, with the ridiculous power of the Pussyfoot. That was his first most difficult boss. However, the guy that almost killed him and guaranteed his death was Don Kreese. So even though the butler, that guy in Usopp's little story, was the first ever truly difficult boss that Luffy fought, the guy that almost killed him permanently, like not just almost killed him to the fact that he gets knocked out and he's near death. I'm talking about the guy that literally almost killed him permanently, was Don Kreese. So Don Kreese is one of the most important characters in all of One Piece history, because he was the first guy to almost kill Luffy. Moving on from that, however, Luffy eventually becomes stronger and uses first gear, a different method he discovered while fighting Don Kreese, is to use his first gear as not only to harden his hands, but to bypass his limits and to torture himself at the same time, and punch through Don Kreese's spike shield using his hands, which completely shattered his hands, and the spike went straight through his hands. But eventually, that amount of force coming at Don Kreese would completely bend his shield, his iron armor, and destroyed everything on his iron armor, including punching it so hard will damage whoever was on the receiving end. And Don Kreese got his face caved in, and he goes down. And he's not completely defeated, but he goes down. He then gets up. Sanji goes to rescue Luffy from being drowning. Unfortunately, that's not enough. Don Kreese gets up. Don Kreese is about to kill Luffy. Luffy finally shatters his armor. He goes down. Luffy grabbed him by his shoulders using his elastic hands and spinning him around in the air, and then slam him to the ground, shattering what's remains of his armor on the ground. And that's pretty much the end of Don Kreese. He gets spun into the air and slammed into the ground, and then finally slammed onto the ground. And the story of Don Kreese is over. There was a section within his fight with Don Kreese where he spun him like a top and spiral him to the ground. I didn't show that one because I'm trying to push on forward. So he spirals him to the ground like a bullet. That was the first time Don Kreese got knocked out and he became unconscious. But it wasn't until Luffy finally slammed him in the ground after spinning him like a top that he he got completely destroyed. So the top basically made him become unconscious when he falls on his body or on his head. And then Luffy finished him off thereafter. So his story came to an end. Sanji joins the crew, and then the story of the seven warlords became a thing. So before in Luffy, many episodes, it wasn't described what the seven warlords were, but later on in the episode, it started to describe the seven warlords of rulers of the sea, warlords of the ocean. They're in the many seas of One Piece. There are two great oceans. There's the East and there's the West. And the East Ocean and the West Ocean are called the Grand Line. East of the Grand Line, west of the Grand Line. And the Grand Line are continents and oceans that fall within two sections of One Piece. If you're not ruling on one part of the Grand Line, you're ruling on another part of the Grand Line. It's kind of like the equator. But though the equator is horizontal, I believe the Grand Line is supposed to be considered something that's vertical. Or I could be wrong. The Grand Line could probably pretty much means the equator itself. Or the borderlines on a grid line. Like there's north and south on the grid line, east and west on the grid line, and the zero on the grid line is the center part of the grid line. And when you cross over by latitude and longitude on a certain grid line, you've passed that grand line of that latitude and longitude. So you're either north or you're south, falling into the east and west of the north and south of that line. That's what that means. So in One Piece, when you go to the Grand Line, you're basically crossing from one part of yours, part of an ocean, into a major part of another ocean, the Grand Ocean of many oceans. So once you go to the Grand Line, you've crossed over from your section of one latitude to the major section of that latitude and longitude. So there are small sections of latitude and longitude, and then there's the major section of latitude and longitude. Basically meaning you're going from small islands to continental divide, or to continental areas. Basically an island compared to a continent. That's the description of Grand Canal area or open seas area to the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal is basically a description of life in the major parts of the world. Continental area part of the world, where Asia, Africa, South America, that type of stuff exists, compared to where Luffy's from, where it's a couple of, islands in the middle of nowhere. You're now going into uncharted waters of where major players within the universe exist. So on their way to the Grand Line, they're told of the story of the seven warlords. Now, Arlong is not one of the seven warlords. He's just another small dictator that's in charge of the village of where Nami is from. He's one of the fishmen, and the fishmen are a character or characters. Fishmen are one of the characters within One Piece. They represent a species of One Piece. There are many species within One Piece, and like all fictional stories, none of them are completely associated with the human nature other than the formation of their bodies in order to look somewhat human in nature, but they are not of humanity. Like in Star Wars, you got the Ewoks. Not really people, but they could walk around like people. Totally DNA difference, totally original story, totally different background. And fishmen are one of these things. So Arlong is a bad guy of the fishmen, a pirate, took over Nami's village, basically from since Nami was a kid. She's been owing him for her entire life. She's been trying to get out of debt with this guy. Turns out that he had her on the hooks the whole time, tried to sabotage her, and every attempt that she's trying to make to get away from him and to save her village from this dictator has been failed. So eventually, she started cut into her arm and remove his tattoo from her arm in order to show that she's not in allegiance to this guy anymore. everyone who's part of this village has this tattoo on their arm if they're dedicated to his cause, or he makes them put the tattoo on their arm in order to say that you serve me. Not everyone in the village has this because not everyone in the village can actually work for him. The ones that are slave to him don't have it on their arms because they're slave, but those who work for him have it on their arm as an allegiance to him. Nami takes her knife, cuts it out, or cuts on it. Eventually, Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp decides to help Nami out to save him from Arlong. Luffy knocks out Arlong. Arlong and Luffy passes out. The big battle between them happens. Luffy eventually gets suffocated by Arlong in the water because he's a fish man. Eventually, Luffy defeats him because it doesn't matter. If Luffy knows how to make his body elastic, he knows how to turn his body into a bubble while underwater, able to escape from underwater. Eventually, Arlong uses his teeth in trying to kill him. It doesn't work, however. Luffy turns the tables, defeats him, knocks him out. That's the end of Arlong, using Arlong's own tactics against him. The next character we see is a guy named Smoker. Obviously, he's called Smoker because he has nothing but cigars on him and he smokes all the time. He also eats the devil fruit. And devil fruit is a fruit that makes him turn into nothing but smoke. I guess you could say his devil fruit allows him to smoke. Without him smoking, he won't be able to use his devil fruit. Or maybe the devil fruit by eating the devil fruit, it became his habit of smoking became an addiction that he has to have multiple cigarettes or cigars all at the same time. Who knows? It could be that the devil fruit didn't make him smoke that much. That it kind of knew that he's the type of guy that smokes, so it just enhanced his habit from the beginning. Or maybe he just took it because he realized that the devil fruit is called smoke fruit, so it makes sense for him to take it. Regardless, he's a bounty hunter and he hunts down Luffy. Luffy goes to, I think, Marine HQ, or a town located around where Marine HQ is, where Smokey exists, to see I think it was the place where Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, got killed. And so he saw the platform for which Gold Roger was killed on. It's like a memorial area, like a marker in history. He says, "Oh, this is the place where he got killed. Eventually, I'm going to find One Piece that Gold Roger originally found, and I'm going to be the new king of the pirates." But he went to see this monument location, which is the actual place he died. And eventually he takes off, and eventually meets a girl called Vivi, and Vivi has her own arc as well. And this is the beginning arc of Vivi's story, or should I say, this is the Sand arc, or you could call this Crocodile's arc. Who Crocodile is he's one of the warlords. So the first warlord we met within the story was a guy called Mihawk. But we never see his face. We're never shown his face. We only show a shadow of his face. And he represents, if I go all the way back, one of these warlords here, 7 warlords. We only saw his image based on a silhouette. And he was just one that was shown. And he was the person that Zoro wants to defeat more than anything in order to be the greatest swordsman of all times. So by defeating the greatest swordsman of all times, which happens to be a warlord called Mihawk, Zoro can become the greatest swordsman of all times. But in order to do so, he has to first find him and excel his powers enough to defeat this guy. However, that does not happen without first them liberating. That cannot happen without first liberating this town, for which Vivi, or not town, more like a city that she's in charge of. Yeah, more like a province, a city within a province that she's in charge of. She's a princess, Princess Vivi, and she's in charge of this place. I forgot the name of the city, but I didn't forget the name of the bad guy or of the princess that's in charge of the city. So what happened is Luffy, they talked to her, And she says this guy came to their city one day and took over forcefully, got rid of everyone. His name was Crocodile, and he's a warlord. It wasn't discovered that he was a warlord until later when they first met Nico Robin. And the first appearance of Nico Robin is during Crocodile's little arc, or Vivi's little arc, if you want to call it that. And Nico Robin basically says, well, you can't defeat Crocodile, no one can, he's a warlord, blah, blah, blah. It's like, to fight him is futile, you're wasting your time. I already have powers that could defeat all of you anyway. She ate devil fruit as well. So she's basically subdued him, or she gives him a warning before she subdued him later on. And her powers could basically create hands. Like her hands on her body could create multiple hands all over the place. Out of nowhere. They could just pop around you, surround you, grab you from under the ground, or through walls, anything. She could create as many hands as she possibly can if she could see where she's going, or what she's doing, or the enemy within her vision, or within her scope. It doesn't matter where she's standing. And that doesn't sound very powerful, but if you're about to draw your sword, and then all of a sudden a hand pops up on your hand while you're about to draw your sword, before you draw your sword, you can't defeat this character, because this character can subdue you before you even draw your weapon. Because as long as she could see what you're about to do, it doesn't matter how fast you are. So unless you're beyond the speed of sight, you cannot defeat this character. So you have to be at lightning speed to do something in order for you to stop this character, Nico Robin. So she basically gives a warning to stay away from Crocodile. You'll all get killed. Eventually, more Navy people shows up to the party. They say they're going to defeat and capture Straw Hat Luffy for interrupting Crocodile's activities. It's like, you start thinking to yourself, well, why would Navy HQ care about Crocodile being safe or interrupting Crocodile, who's definitely a tyrant, They fully know he's a tyrant. Why do they care about Crocodile staying in power, ruling over the city, or staying as a warlord and being defeated as a warlord? And many of this came as a surprise to many people who first read the One Piece manga, is that Crocodile is essential for future stories. Because the warlords, all 7 warlords, are essential for balance within the seas of east part of Grand Canal, not the west part of Grand Canal, or I believe it's east-west, it doesn't really matter, but a certain section of the Grand Canal. Because all the 7 warlords of the Grand Canal are within that section, and they're the one that keeps stability for the other pirates, or many lower level pirates or independent pirates throughout all of One Piece. Without the warlords say, certain pirates, lower level or independent, can't make certain move. So if you defeat one warlord, you're disrupting the stability of all pirates in order to be unstable. The only way the Marine HQ and those who are in charge of the higher ups can keep all pirates in their place is to have the warlords also in their place. So in order to keep the warlords in their place to do what they need to do, and to keep stability between the military and the pirates, and to have a sense of harmony between both pirates and Marine HQ, is, since neither can defeat each other, the warlords are just too strong to fight them all at the same time. Because if all the warlords game alliance towards each other to defeat Navy HQ, eventually Navy HQ would shatter and fall to the ground, no matter who they are, because certain warlords are just that powerful. So in order to form an alliance with the warlords, Marine HQ and the government decides, well, listen, the government is smarter than Marine HQ, and tell them, listen, if these people band together, they eventually destroy Marine HQ. That's essential for stability of the Grand Line. So the only way to keep them in place is to give them what they want and give them a title, so they could do whatever they want, however, whenever they want, as long as they don't do certain things. So in that agreement to leave them alone, they are kind of the government's lapdogs in a certain sense. But they are lapdogs because they choose to be, and they could choose to deny it at any time. However, denying such things to be a lapdog means to go against the will of their agreement. Breaking such a pact means that they are now be pursued again. So once the government got wind that Luffy is intending on defeating Crocodile, um, they sent various different Marines, vice admirals, and even captains to go after Luffy, to defeat him and to capture him and put him under arrest. Because if Crocodile falls, then the whole thing falls apart. Eventually, that does happen, but during the process of that happening, they first meet Chopper here, and this medical practitioner who saves different people. Eventually, Chopper joins the crew, but not without first stories that passed on their way to defeating Crocodile. So many stories happen on the way of One Piece before Luffy meets Crocodile. We get to see the story of Ace. Well, not really the story of Ace. We get to see Ace popping up some episodes later before meeting Crocodile within the city, and Ace saying he's looking for his little brother Luffy. We get to see Ace meeting Smoker. Smoker says, "Why are you looking for Luffy?" "I'm gonna find Luffy because the government told me to find Luffy, because Marine HQ told me to find Luffy. I'm a bounty hunter who's sent." He's not really like a bounty hunter, but he's really like a bounty hunter. That's who Smoker is. I don't really think he's a bounty hunter. I think he's more like a U.S. Marshal. That's what Smoker is. He's very much like a U.S. Marshal, independent from Marine HQ, but still have to serve and follow their rules. He's very much a U.S. Marshal. He can go anywhere he needs to go in order to get the job done. So he's after Luffy, and he finds Ace and says, "Well, you know, Ace, I can't really let you go. You're a pirate." And say, "I'm not really after you. I'm after Luffy, but I know that you're here, but by letting you go goes against all my morals, which I stand for." So they were about to have a fight, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Luffy breaks in, busts up the party, and then crashes into both Ace and Smoker. Eventually, the next scene, we see Nico Robin reporting back to Smoker. Reporting back to Crocodile. Crocodile saying, "Well, you know, as long as you're loyal to me and do what I have to do, everything will be fine. Betraying me, you'll die, blah, 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 blah." The same standard thing. He says he's not worrying about the Straw Hat or anyone coming here. He's already ruling this era within a couple of days, or maybe even a week. I think it's a couple of days. This whole place will go under, because he is planning on abandoning the city anyway, because he is only here to attain something specific for himself to further his own ambition and his general goal. I believe his words were, I don't mind the city crumbling down because I could always build this city," or something like that. Or if I'm completely wrong, he wants to rule over this land completely. If he has completely rule over this land, he could increase his military might. So yeah, I believe that's what happens. He wants to rule over this land completely without any adversaries, simply to increase his military and navy might, because he wants to be more than just a warlord. He wants to be the warlord in order to conquer more than just lands. He wants to take control of an entire Grand Line and never have to bow to Marine HQ ever again. In fact, he wants to completely destroy Marine HQ with the assistance of other pirates, and hopefully other warlords in the end. If he gains considerable military power, not even Marine HQ or the government could stop him. It is here that I should point out the fact that there are four or five people in charge of, about 5 people in charge of government headquarters. Now, the government headquarters is above Navy HQ, and there are 5 elders that are in charge of government headquarters. And these 5 elders are 5 old men, obviously, and they represent the people who runs the government of the entire government of the world of One Piece. Both those on the Grand Line, of the east side of Grand Line, and the west side of Grand Line. Basically, they're in control of the major government of the entire world itself. You could basically think of them as Well, I'm not even sure if that's true. But as far as I know, they're in charge of everything on a certain line of the Grand Line. They're ruling government from a vast amount, I believe. And that's how it's described. Um, it feels more like the five elders are the government of the world, so they feel more like a United Nations government rather than an individual nation government. But if they're an individual nation government and there are five people ruling it, they're very much like a country itself, ruled by a main government and has a main superpower navy behind them that rules that entire part of the Grand Line. So in One Piece, the five major elders are very much like the rulers of one half of the Grand Line. I'm not sure if they're the rulers of the other half of the Grand Line as well, but it's in the manga, it comes across as if they're in control of every aspect of the Grand Line, both the east and the west side of the Grand Line, basically the whole world itself, and how things run within the government of the world. That's why I consider them more to be like a United Nations power control faction or something. Not really faction, but basically a singular government that's in charge of the world itself when it comes to stability. That said, I don't believe that's the case though. But that said, moving on from there, Crocodile sends out his giant-sized crocodiles, which happen to have banana-shaped heads on top of them. They're called the banana crocodiles. It's completely ridiculous. The banana crocodiles apparently eat one of Crocodile's servants that disobey them or fail to make them happy. And these giant-sized crocodiles are pretty much creatures that are part of the whole Grand Line thing. No, no animal within One Piece is normal size. They're all like kaiju types or remnants of kaiju types. They're small creatures as well as they're ridiculous sized creatures in One Piece, just like there are in Naruto, and just like there are in Hunter x Hunter. So that said, moving forward from that, we see hunters, or should I say, we see the hunter slash U.S. Marshal, um, Smoker get captured by Crocodile, sentenced to death by Crocodile, as well as Luffy as well. So Luffy, Smoker, and the rest of the Straw Hat crew are in bars behind, um, inside Crocodile's little mansion. Crocodile say he's going to feed them all to the crocodiles. Turns out that that's not the case. Eventually, Luffy escapes. Eventually, Crocodile gets into a one-on-one combat with Crocodile. Luffy gets into a one-on-one combat with Crocodile. Eventually, Nico Robin walks away, say, I got other things I got to do. Crocodile doesn't trust her. Crocodile gets into combat with Luffy. Luffy flies in to save the day. Luffy says he knows how to defeat Crocodile. He uses water as a way to dampen Crocodile's sand abilities. Sand fruit, I believe Crocodile's powers was sand fruit. So water turns the sand into hard, muddy sand, which makes Crocodile unable to disappear into the mist of sand, which allows Luffy to damage a Crocodile. And because Crocodile cannot disappear if his sand gets wet. So once Crocodile is unable to disappear, Luffy basically kicks his ass, and that's the end of his story. Dousing his body with water, he then the Marine HQ then invades the city in order to stop the pirates, stop Luffy. They get defeated by Nico Robin, who says she's not going to allow them to interrupt. Moving forward from there, we get to see another scene where context regards to Nico Robin's past is being emphasized, that she, as a child, was responsible for 7 ships getting destroyed. That it's assumed that she has a devil inside of her, and the world government, Navy HQ as well, wants to capture her and have a high bounty on her because they believe she's a threat to the entire world. Even more so than Luffy is, even more so than Crocodile is. There's something that she's basically, it's assumed that she's a demon walking amongst the world of men, that type of threat. It's unsure if that's true, but they certainly believe it, that she has this dark entity inside of her that can destroy the entire world. Nico Robin eventually gets defeated by, well, by Crocodile, because once he realized her betrayal, he takes her out. He eventually starts to fight Luffy again. Usopp and the others, Sanji and Zoro, they fire off the signal. I believe Usopp fire off the signal with Nami. The signal is seen by Vivi's loyal Hawk servant, or a Hawk ally. Um, they eventually escape. Eventually, after that, more fight happens between Crocodile and Luffy. Eventually, Crocodile gets smashed into the ceiling. He gets defeated by Luffy after getting smashed into the ceiling. Luffy and Nami and Usopp and Sanji and Zoro leaves after saving the city and rescuing Vivi. And they basically tell her that they'll meet again. They put up their hands and they mark the X at the back of their hands to represent the friendship that they have with regards to Vivi. Vivi also have an X in the back of her hands. It's a bond that they have over the course of Vivi's little arc in One Piece. Moving on from Vivi's arc slash Crocodile's arc, or story, the story of the Crocodile and Vivi, we get to see Luffy and crew come in contact with even more pirates, and these are pirates associated with uh, long-term player, another warlord called Don Flamingo. And Don Flamingo is someone that shows up later on within the One Piece arc. And he has many pirates or smaller pirates under him. One of them is called Hyena, and I forgot his name, but he's coded name as the Hyena. It's B something. I forgot his name. But these two airheads here works for this guy called Hyena, and eventually throw money towards Luffy for and told him to get better outfit. If they're going to be pirates, they should be pimping out. Luffy's pissed off about it. They all get insulted, so they all go to this bar in order to, drink their sorrows away. Not because they got insulted by a bunch of low-level pirates, claiming to be badasses and have the cash that they could spend whenever they want, and that they should wear better attire. That's us. They're just pissed off that these guys get to buy out the entire island for, I guess, a night, 2 or 3 or even 4. That they can't even get a room because of those douchebags. So getting pissed off that they're not allowed to get a room by the room attendant or the hotel manager. They eventually goes to a bar to drink their sorrows and pissed off. And this is the first appearance of the character, which is very important to One Piece history, and is a long-term player throughout the entire One Piece arc, or should I say throughout the entire story of One Piece in total. Now, I said this before in Hunter x Hunter, and I'll say it before here as well. There are short-term arcs, then there are long-term arcs, then there are long-term arcs. There's the big game arcs. And the big game arcs are the long end game arcs. You have characters showing up at the beginning of a story, and those characters are at the end of a story before they make no more anime with regards to any type of animes. Those things fall into short stories, short arcs, mid arcs, long arcs, and end game arcs. The long arcs. This is not one of those things. This, or should I say, this is one of those things. This character is a representative of the long arc, the end game arc. And it's surprising to me to this very day that this character showed up. I believe he showed up before the 200th episode of One Piece. I believe in episode 100 or something. Maybe even before episode 100 he had showed up. I don't remember when this episode was, but I remember this was before the character of Don Flamingo was even introduced or shown, when Don Flamingo was just a whisper. that the third warlord within this anime was spoken to or spoken about, but never shown. But this character was shown early on within, I believe, within the 100 episode or so, and he's a big game player. He's a long term player, and his name is Blackbeard. And Blackbeard is the end game to One Piece, equal to that of Thanos is the end game to the Avengers. He's not Thanos like, but he's a representative of that type of end game type. He's the bad guy at the end of the story. There's such a thing that's called, I don't remember the name of the book, but it's a quote, or maybe even it's a figure of speech or a description. I don't remember what it was, but in I believe in a story I read before, of a movie or of a television show, um, it says, this is the monster at the end of the book, or the devil at the end of the story. And this guy is supposed to represent the monster at the end of the book. I don't fully believe that's the case. I believe that that character is reserved for someone else. Someone that was within the very first, or the first episode to the fifth episode of One Piece. I believe this guy might be a blind, but I could be wrong. If it's not a blind, then he is the monster at the end of the book. He is the ultimate bad guy at the end of the story. He doesn't come across as the ultimate bad guy at the end of One Piece story, because he's not played off to be represented that way. But once he's introduced in One Piece here, and when you first saw it, you don't think anything of him. You just think he's a bad guy because he behaves like a bad guy. But it's here within this episode, before taking out these douchebags that are under Flamingo's, or under Hyena's ruling thumb, who Hyena's under Flamingo's ruling thumb. Once we are here and we meet Blackbeard, it is the creator of the manga basically putting the very first breadcrumbs, not the breadcrumbs of Luffy's story or breadcrumbs of One Piece, but putting the very first breadcrumbs of the long, long game. There was the long game from the beginning towards what One Piece is. And then there's the first breadcrumbs of the long, long game within One Piece towards the end game. And there are breadcrumbs with regards to the general One Piece story, and there are breadcrumbs with regards to the long, long game in that general story. And these are the first breadcrumbs towards that long, long game. And this breadcrumb comes in the form of the character called Blackbeard. And Blackbeard is the night and day of Luffy. If Luffy is the day, then Blackbeard is the night. If Blackbeard is the day, then Luffy is the night. They're polar opposites towards each other. They're representative of a similar type of faction, but they're opposing parties of that faction. If I use faction as the word to describe them. If one is yin, the other would be yang. If one is yang, the other is yang. They're both two sides of the same coin. If you have an image of a person on the coin, and if it's the same image of that person on that coin on one side, and it's the same image of that person on that coin on the same side, what makes the difference between the image of that person on the other side of the coin different from the image of the person on the other side of the coin? It would be the details around that side of that coin, or details on that coin, even though the image of the person might be the same. They're same coin, same things, same everything, but there are certain tweaks and certain differences on the side of that coin that's different from the other side of the coin. They're very much polar opposites to each other, but the coin is very much two-sided coin, with minor differences of their characters. So whoever created the character of Blackbeard was using the character of Luffy in order to create someone who would be an adversary to Luffy, that's just like Luffy, but will be the more darker version of Luffy if they weren't like Luffy. Someone who's not skinny and lanky like Luffy, someone who's not as cheerful as Luffy, someone who's determined like Luffy, but in a different way, someone who's willing to betray his friends rather than be loyal to his friends like Luffy, someone who would wear a certain type of clothing that Luffy would never wear, someone who would agree on the type of things that he likes to eat, and where the other character would never agree on eating those type of things or drinking those type of things. And someone who's very much, even though they're very much polar opposites and will do the opposite and dress the opposite and act the opposite of each other, are very much in love with what each other are doing. So in some cases, this is the first indication and hint that Luffy enjoys certain dark things that the anime is unwilling to tell the audience, or if it's willing to tell the audience, certain people are unwilling to accept or to see. So even though Blackbeard behaves a certain way, it's somewhat appealing to Luffy that this type of behavior is something that's luring to Luffy, that he enjoys this type of behavior. He doesn't he won't betray his friends and turn his friends. He would always support his friends and help his friends. But he's fascinated that someone will be willing to do that. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a darkness within Luffy that's willing to do those things that Blackbeard is willing to do. But he's unwilling to do those things at all. He just sees it as fascinations. So it's basically whatever Luffy is feeling that inside of him that he's willing to do or unwilling to do. Blackbeard is a manifestation of those things that he's unwilling to do. So every time Blackbeard does something, Luffy stops and stares at him in hatred, but at awe at the same time. In fact, there are scenes throughout One Piece. Every time he meets Blackbeard, he's always staring at him. He doesn't do this for any enemy. He doesn't do this for Flamingo. He doesn't do this for Don Kreese. He doesn't do this for anyone on his crew. He doesn't do this for any enemy he's ever fought, Lucci or anyone, or Moria. He doesn't do this for anyone. Every time he's around Blackbeard, he almost always stares at him in a way that this person is my enemy, the end goal. Luffy kind of feels and knows that this person is who he is. In some weird way, he kind of feels that this person is who Luffy is. That this is what person is what he would eventually be in the end if he decided to choose this type of path. So every time he looks at Blackbeard, he's basically seeing himself in a behavior that he would never do, that he doesn't want to become. So every time he stares at Blackbeard, he knows for a fact that this is his enemy. Luffy hates this person. He wants to kill Blackbeard, but he's unwilling to kill someone simply out of hatred. In all truth, every time Luffy stares at Blackbeard, it's like staring at someone that you want to end no matter what. This is the Joker to a Batman type of character. So by defeating this representative of Don Flamingo, Hyena, he beats him to the ground, kicks his ass. That's the end of that story. The story then continues on when Mihawk finds that Luffy's bounty gone up by a considerable amount. The defeat of Crocodile has now begun the long game arc. Not the long game, but the long game arc. And this is the first introduction towards the appearance of Mihawk. We get to finally see how he looks, how his clothes look, how his hat looks. I believe when Zoro first fought him, it's shown his image. So I might have missed out on that, but this is the second time we actually physically see how he looks. He looks like a debonair musketeer or something like that with a giant sword on his back. That said, the story of One Piece now pivots to another zenith, the first zenith of many zeniths. I believe there are 4 to 5 different zeniths within One Piece, and the first zenith, the first peak that One Piece or Luffy and the Straw Hat Crew must excel over, is the first defeat. Was the first defeat of the first warlord, which they did. They accomplished the first defeat of the first warlord, which was their first hurdle in order to change the story of One Piece moving forward. By defeating Crocodile, they initiated a thunderstorm of many different branches of reality, so to speak, in the One Piece universe. They attract the attention of many different candidates who want to get an ass whooping. In other words, Luffy has many people ass he has now to kick simply because he knocked over you know, um, a beast hornet, or knocked down a beast hornet. He caused an imbalance within the force, so to speak. Something that's been kept balanced for quite some time, for quite some years, maybe for even a decade or so, or more. By defeating Crocodile, he disturbed the hornet's nest. And it's not just about capturing Luffy and stopping Luffy from defeating Crocodile now. It's about keeping stability within the force of the government, within the force of Navy HQ, and within the forces of all of pirates now. Because now everyone is going after trying to become the next warlord. And all the pirates are going to be fighting amongst each other. And all the warlords are probably going to be fighting amongst each other. And that's what is assumed. But that's not the case. But all the lower level pirates, however, are now going to be fighting factions against factions against factions to become the next warlord, which creates incredible amount of stress for the Marine HQ and the government to keep into control. So Luffy is a dead man walking, basically. So world government, supreme authorities, the 5 elders basically say, well, it's time for us to terminate this kid. Not capture him, terminate him. Because if he continues down this path of disrupting things, and if we cannot capture him, we have to kill him. If he's truly after the One Piece, which we cannot allow to happen, we must terminate him. So an executive decision is made for the capture or termination of the character of Luffy. Before it was all about capture. Now it's about termination, not just about capture. If he gets the One Piece, it's endgame territory. Which is here's the thing, the One Piece is considered a myth to everyone who's never seen the One Piece, except for Gold Roger. The world government does not believe that the One Piece exists. The world government believes that the One Piece is just a myth created by Gold Roger, even though certain people within the government, I believe amongst the 5 elders, one of them actually knows that the One Piece does exist, and is refusing to tell the others within that group. In fact, it's assumed that possibly 2 out of those main elders might actually know that One Piece truly exists or not, and the others are simply playing it off as a blind. Moving forward from that, we then see Don Flamingo, and his name is Don Quixote do Flamingo. But everyone calls him Flamingo because, no one wants to call him Don Quixote. So they just call him Flamingo. Former bounty was 340 million berries. Eventually that goes up as the anime goes up. He's the worst of the worst. Between him and Blackbeard, they both vying for the competition of Luffy giving them an ass whooping. In other words, if Flamingo wasn't the endgame bad guy, Blackbeard is. And if Blackbeard is not the endgame bad guy, Flamingo is. This is why I was saying I'm not sure if Blackbeard is the true endgame bad guy of One Piece. Because if he's not, then it's this guy. He's truly the most vile person on the planet. Where Blackbeard basically kill people and do whatever he wants and is considered the most evil person alive. This guy vying for the competition of the most evil person alive. He's done terrible things, more than just kidnapping, more than just killing, more than just putting people on slave, more than just destroying a city, more than just doing assassination things or having people underlings under him who is killed simply because he doesn't like them, just because he didn't like them. He sabotaged and used espionage and used government officials as well as other pirates to serve his purposes, and is willing to pretty much let every one of them die in order for him to rise to the top. He's really more than anything the most bad person in all of One Piece. To the I guess to a fault, worse than Blackbeard, because he's willing to use everything and everyone to further his ambitions. He doesn't care who lives and who dies. He has no attachment to loyalty towards anyone, and all those who are loyal to him are willing to die for him. He's very much a Dio. In JoJo Bizarre Adventures, this guy would be the equivalent of a Dio in the One Piece universe. He is willing to have multiple people serve him and willing to die for him so he could achieve his purposes. So he's the Dio in this world, where Blackbeard is more like the Thanos in this world. So moving on from that, we get to meet another warlord. This guy is called Bartholomew Kuma. He's extremely powerful, and when I believe he did surgery on himself to become half human, half robotic. And there are multiple copies of him. So his DNA as well as his parts of his body was put onto governmental experimentation to duplicate his body to a certain degree. I don't know why he agreed to this, but it's assumed that he agreed to this because something of his past was completely destroyed, so he agreed to serve the government willingly, or somewhat unwillingly, in order to achieve his own personal ends, or to a certain degree, under agreeing to certain things, he is no longer considered human. So moving on from that, we get to see another man called the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard, the great pirate, Edward Newgate. And this guy was an opposing pirate to Gold Roger. At the moment, he is the strongest person in all of One Piece. In fact, to this day, people still consider him the strongest person in all of One Piece. He's the only person within the Grand Line that's unstoppable. It's weird though. After Gold Roger died, he's basically the king of pirates. No one could stop him, so to speak. None of the warlords can stop him. None of the government officials can stop him, including the people from the CP units, like their special hidden units, assassination units, and also the admirals. There are three admirals that are part. If I remember this correctly, there are three admirals that are in charge of the Navy HQ. Akainu is the leader of these three admirals, and these three admirals are basically the people who are in charge of everything that has to do with the military might of the government. So once those three admirals are defeated, basically the world government can be defeated. Basically, that's what it's saying. And the only people standing in the way of, or should I say, the only person standing in the way of these admirals is the great pirate Edward Newgate. He's the only person that could fight against them on equal footing, or they are the only person that could stand against him on equal footing. I believe in all truth, if he wanted to, he could kill at least one or two of those people. Whereas I think the third one might actually do him in. People say Akainu can beat this guy easy, but in all truth, Akainu would probably get destroyed if this guy didn't have medical situations going on with his body due to his age. If this guy was in his prime, and he is considered the strongest man in all the world of One Piece, Akainu would get his ass kicked easily. However, if Akainu was to team up with the other two admirals, Edward Newgate would eventually get killed. Edward would eventually get killed in the end if those three admirals were to join forces and fight together, which eventually happens in the end. Their powers combined together in a rescue of Ace led to the death of Whitebeard. And Also because Whitebeard is a certain age. So even if this guy was in his prime, he would completely destroy at least 2 out of those 3 admirals, leaving the third one to probably kill him in the process if he was in his prime. But with the death of two admirals and leaving one in his place, that one would probably get killed by the warlords in the end, and thus the government will come crashing down. So no matter how you see it, Edward Newgate, aka Whitebeard, would eventually be the person to destroy the world government by himself. If he was in his prime and took out 2 of the admirals. Moving on from that, Blackbeard is then introduced again, but finally we get to see his real name, Marshall D. Teach. That's his name. Another thing to point out within One Piece is the D in One Piece represents something very important. Luffy has that D. Gold Rogers had that D. Marshall D. Teach has that D. Ace didn't have that D, or at least I assume Ace didn't have that D. Whitebeard didn't have that D. No one has the D. The D is a representation of something. However, when Whitebeard asked Gold Roger when they were young bucks what the D meant, the anime cuts off and it doesn't tell you. In fact, even in the manga, it doesn't tell you what it is because it's not going to tell you yet until the One Piece has probably been discovered or the revelation of the Gangbun fruit is fully described in full. So until they reach to that part within the manga, which they haven't yet, the D is not going to be fully defined. It's not just an initial within the word. It means something. The reason when certain people carry the word D within their name, it's intentionally meant to be given to them. Their names that they have, the D in their names, was not given to them by themselves. It was given to them by someone who gave them that name. Luffy didn't give himself that D in that name. Marshall D. Teach didn't give himself that D in that name. Gold Roger didn't give himself that D in that name. It was something bestowed onto them by someone or something to mean something, or they took it upon themselves, which they couldn't possibly have because Luffy didn't take it upon himself to have the D. It was given to them by someone or some force or something for reasons they cannot describe, including Gold Roger himself, for reasons he couldn't describe it himself. But eventually he knew about it and told Whitebeard about it. But Whitebeard, upon his death, never told anyone about it. Maybe he told Ace, maybe he told Shanks. But in the manga, it has not been revealed yet. That D is an essential component towards what One Piece is, and to define what One Piece and what the Gunman Fruit and the story of One Piece is. It's not just a letter within their names. It means something very important. Moving forward, we get to see Blackbeard's crew. Moving forward from that, we get to see the next arc, which is the Skypiea arc. The crew are looking for the One Piece, and on their way, you get to see another story moving forward. And the story is about the people who live in a place called Skypiea. It's a land covered with clouds in the sky. So they sail on the high seas of the ocean on the Grand Line. They finally reach the Grand Line, and they manage to get to the section within the ocean where the waterfall goes upwards and take them into the sky. And it's only at this area that they are able to sail into the sky from the water, and the water eventually turns from water into condensed air, and that condensed air eventually becomes clouds. And eventually the Mary is actually sailing on clouds, which is kind of impossible, but it's later described within the anime what that is. I believe the name for it, what was the name? I don't remember the name, and it's a very complicated name. But it's a component that's located within a blue marine particle that allow for the existence of condensation to become, or the existence of particles within the condensed air to turn clouds into hard components that to keep things afloat, that they're not just clouds, that they keep things afloat, but not just to keep things afloat, to stay at their atmospheric potency of being lighter than air. So it's weird as they go up into the atmosphere and stay within certain parts of the atmosphere, they get to keep their appearance as clouds, but the strength of their appearance as cloud can now hold certain things in place equal to the level of tons of pressure to keep buildings in the air, to keep ships in the air, to even to sail on those clouds to get to those ships and to get to those areas. It could do that. And the clouds in this anime Skypiea is the water is represented by clouds. Everything's represented by clouds. So Luffy and the crew eventually continues in the Skypiea arc. They meet certain factions who are fighting against this evil group that's serving under a tyrant, and this tyrant name is what is his damn name? Eneru. Yeah, that's his name. Eneru. And Eneru is the would-be god of this place. And eventually he is a pirate that came to this place in search of a specific gold. You could call this Shangri-La. I guess you could call it Shangri-La, the lost city of gold. Or in certain cases, I guess in D&D logic, the city of Amu, the city of gold. In many historical contexts, and especially in mythical belief and legend belief, there's a mythical city of gold left by the Athenians, or the city of, not the Athenians, I'm getting confused, Athens, an ancient civilization that existed in time way before human beings knew what true technology civilization is. Before man was civil, there was a civilization before that. And it's assumed Shangri-La or Athens, the city of gold, or Amu, existed during this time period. Of course, Eneru wants to acquire that item that's within the city and abandon the city eventually in time and destroying it completely after he attained this item. And this item is a gold bell, and this gold bell supposedly give you the power to go beyond godhood, or to attain the power to go beyond godhood. So he's a god pretending to be, or he's a would-be a guy, a pirate who ate a gum fruit that allows him to use electricity to pretend to be the god of this land. Of course, people know about the gum fruit and how gum fruit can make you use certain powers, but his type of gum fruit allows him to use lightning and to teleport using lightning. So he decides to pretend to be a god of this place, not knowing that people eventually come to know that he's just someone who used the gum fruit. So eventually, once that's discovered that he is someone that uses using a different type of gum fruit, or should I shouldn't call it gum fruit, devil fruit, using a different type of devil fruit, the devil fruit that allows him to use electricity. They eventually realize he's no god. They're going to try to take him down with the assistance of Luffy. Eventually, he finds the city, or should I say, Nico Robin finds the city, because Nico Robin's an archaeologist and very much like an Indiana Jones type, and she discovers where the hidden bell is, that item that Eneru is trying to attain. Eventually, that in the lost city of Amu, or the city of gold, or Shangri-La, is discovered by Nico Robin, following a specific paths and specific hieroglyphs and glyphs, ancient glyphs of these people, extremely ancient, before culture. She discovers it and discovers a certain place that Eneru people did not look, and she finds it. I'm not sure if she actually found the treasure, but it's believed that she found the treasure, and eventually Eneru captures Nico Robin, or at least stops Nico Robin. But during the process of this, he is interrupted by Luffy, and he's surprised that Luffy is able to stop him. So much so that his face becomes completely animated, to a ridiculous, like something straight out of Warner Brothers cartoon. His eyes go bugged out, his mouth, and even the snot from his nose started to drip out. It's so ridiculous to a level that I started to crack up when I saw it. Why that is because he tried to kill Luffy using his god powers. A lot of it, to be honest, certain gigawatts of electricity. Um, I don't know how much, to be honest with you, but I realized once he did it upon Luffy, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Electricity does not work against rubber, or a certain amount of electricity cannot destroy rubber. I don't think it was gigawatts. I think it was about 10,000 watts, maybe 20,000 watts of electricity against Luffy. It simply just, Luffy just rubbed it off like it was nothing. Because obviously rubber doesn't work, electricity doesn't work against rubber. So it worked, his power worked on every single person. Nico Robin, Sanji, every single person. But since he never fought someone like Luffy his entire life, he realized this is an opponent he would have to take out using all sorts of powers, not just the power of lightning. So eventually Luffy decides, if I can't take this guy out because he's made out of pure electricity, the only way to stop him from teleporting or using his electricity is to basically find a way to use that electricity to work against him. So he decides to use some giant ball or something that Eneru melted around his arm and spun it and turned it into like this type of a spinning bullet. And I believe he used his first gear, and during the process of using his first gear, I believe this was the first time he developed second gear, fighting Eneru. And Eneru was the first guy, I could be wrong, it could have been when he was fighting Lucci, he developed second gear. No, it was when he fought Lucci, he developed second gear. So here is the first time he used his first gear to turn into a spinning ball. And he turns the giant size spinning ball that Eneru locks onto his arm and use it against him, knocks him out cold clocked. How did he do it? Oh yes, it was like a spring. He used it like a spring bullet out of a gun. So he used it like I think he's calling it a gum bullet, or gum bullet, or gum. Usually he does gum bazooka, but I think this is called gum cannon. So it's like a cannonball, straight a bullet ball out of a cannon, going straight towards Eneru. But he twirled it to a certain amount that it was like a spring bullet shot from out of a gun. So it was a giant sized ball, big enough to be the size of a statue, and he shot it off like a huge bullet going at sound speed, beyond the speed of sound, and it shot directly towards Eneru and completely knocked him out cold. That even if Enel tried to counteract it, he wouldn't be able to do anything, because the shock factor of getting hit by something at the speed of sound at that size completely would knock anyone, no matter how powerful they are, unconscious. So he got completely obliterated by Luffy, and that's the end of the Skypiea arc. The next thing we see is our boy here, Flamingo, scheming with his henchmen, and eventually said, "You fail me, I'll kill you," blah blah blah. He eventually kills Hyena. I forgot the name of the guy. It's B something, but I call him Hyena. So he kills the guy, or it's assumed that he kills the guy. The guy didn't completely die, but it's assumed that he kills the guy. But the guy survived, and he went off on his own in order to pursue Luffy on his own, in order to stop Luffy, in order to give Luffy to the five elders of the government. He doesn't really give a damn about giving Luffy to the five elders of the government, or giving him to Navy HQ. He only cares about giving him so that they could give him something to further his own ambitions. In all truth, he doesn't really want to help Navy HQ or the government. This guy is vile to a fault, to a level that's beyond that of the vilest people. Next, we see one of the admirals pop up after Skypia's arc is over. He just shows up on the land. We believe he's there to stop Luffy, but yeah, he's not there to stop Luffy. He's there to stop Nico Robin, and it's weird. Admirals typically have their underlings serving them, but he shows up by himself. Um, Vice admirals, captains, so on, lieutenants, a group of powerful people in ships. But this guy is not that type of person. He doesn't let his underlings do his work. If he's this powerful, he says, well, if Nico Robin is this much of a threat, you need someone that's this powerful in order to stop her. So the government is still on that Nico Robin nonsense, believing that she has a sleeping devil inside her. And in order to stop her, they need someone equally powerful in order to stop her, to capture her. Obviously, he would have to get through Luffy and the gang in order to do so, but he doesn't stop them because he's not really after Luffy and the gang. And since they will never give up Nico Robin, they try to physically stop. They try to physically stop this guy. And unfortunately, I think his name is Aokiji. Yeah, that's his name, Aokiji. And Aokiji frees the sea itself in order to help the people cross the sea. So he's not entirely a bad guy. And then, as Aokiji was trying to capture Nico Robin, he got into a fight with Luffy. Luffy stops him, but eventually Aokiji freezes Luffy completely and freezes Nico Robin completely, and the capture would have been attained. Unfortunately, he didn't count for Sanji, he didn't count for Zoro, and they were able to interrupt him capturing Nico Robin, and Luffy would have died. This is the second time Luffy almost died. The first time Luffy almost died, like completely died, was fighting Don Kreese. The third time Luffy almost died completely, I believe, or no, the first time he almost died was fighting Don Kreese. The second time he almost fully died, was fighting Eneru. The third time he almost fully died was fighting Aokiji. And why this is more important than fighting Don and Eneru more than anything else. This is a permanent death. This is a complete obliteration. He could have somewhat survived on his own if the Gum Gum fruit initiated his heart to come back to life. If no one saved them in previous arcs or previous stories in One Piece, this would be the first time he would have completely died permanently. It wouldn't matter who tried to save him, he would have died completely. How this is possible because Aokiji basically said, you see how I just smashed these ice sickles right over here? You're completely frozen. All I have to do is pound on your body and you completely fall and shatter into pieces of ice. That's all. That's all I need to do to kill you, is to kick you once and you shatter completely. And this is true. Luffy's completely frozen. It's not ice over his body. It's his entire body, including his internal organs, his bones, everything is frozen ice. All Aokiji needs to do is kick him once, and that's the death of Luffy. So this is the first time in the history of One Piece he could have met permanent death. All deaths before was small in comparison to this death. This could have been his first permanent death, but it never happened. His friends allowed him to survive. First, they grabbed Nico Robin, which distracted Aokiji from killing Luffy straight out, because he's actually after Nico Robin, and then it allows for them, or should I say, allow for Zoro and others to help Luffy thaw out. And moving forward from that, we then go into, after Aokiji leaves, we go into the story of them coming to another part of the island. And this other part of the island is another story, another arc. And this happens to be the story of the CP unit that's part of the government. This unit is called CP9. And they're a special elite unit. They're like the CIA or something like that. Or they're like the James Bond or the CIA, secret agents working within the government, or secret assassins working within the government. They're personal assassins of the government sent to do it. They're not bounty hunters. They're more like governmental assassins sent in to do the dirty work when, regular U.S. Marshals or hunters can't do the work. They're sent in to do the dirty work. So the CP9 unit is sent to take care of Luffy and his crew, but that's not the case. It turns out that they're actually after Nico Robin to capture her, since Aokiji couldn't do it. And this is the first time we're introduced to Franklin, a character that's framed for the possibility of death or possibly injury of an old man who's, I forgot his name as well, because it's not as important as the main characters of the story or the crews that are going to be part of the Merry. And Franklin is a part of the Merry, became a part of the Merry as time goes on. So Franklin is framed for the damage and hurt of a main player within this arc. And eventually the CP9 unit shows up and say, well, listen, we're going to take care of Nico Robin in our own way. Anyone gets in the way, they're going to die. Eventually, CP9 revealed their hands as not people who used to work for this man. That's part of the base of operations for this new arc. CP9 revealed themselves to be governmental officials to him, that they were just pretending to be laborers that was working for this man, and that their sole goal was to capture Nico Robin at any cost and kill anyone along the way and frame him anyone as they could. So doing that by revealing themselves, they capture Nico Robin, take Nico Robin away, and they're on their way to go back to the government itself, not to Navy headquarters, but just to the government itself. Navy headquarters is a remnant, or not really a remnant, it's a representative of the government from the military point of view. But the government works on its own, has its own private army as well. And factions also have different groups within the private army in order to serve their purposes. And CP9 unit is part of those private armies, or units of those private armies. So they're taking Nico Robin directly to the government itself. So moving on from that, we now see a character called Sogeking. And this guy wears a mask, and it's obviously who he is. He's Usopp. And why Usopp is wearing this mask is because during this arc of rescuing Nico Robin from the CP9 unit, eventually Usopp gets captured and tortured, and no one from the Straw Hat crew came to rescue him. So he started to have a resentment against the Straw Hat crew, and to a level that he decided he wanted to quit the Straw Hat crew. Eventually, Luffy allowed him to quit. And he said he'll never be part of the Straw Hat crew again on the Merry, but he couldn't completely do it. So he came back, but he came back out of shame that he came back. So he decided to put on this mask and represent this persona of this character called Sogeking. Everyone knows it's him, except for Luffy and Chopper, because they're kind of slow that way. It's assumed that Luffy doesn't know, but it's also assumed that he does know, but he doesn't want to say. I mean, how could you not know that is, Usopp behind this? He basically, Sogeking tells Luffy when he meets him, like, listen, I'm a person that's related to, or not related to Usopp. I'm a personal friend of Usopp. I'm just like him. I'm a hero to Usopp. Usopp personally follows me. I'm a hero of my people. And I know Usopp. So it's assumed that Luffy is playing it off and pretending that he doesn't know that this is Usopp. But the manga and the anime shows it like like Luffy is stupid. He doesn't know that this is Usopp. Or maybe he really doesn't know that this is Usopp. So Sogeking shows up, does his whole Sogeking thing. And this is the first time the character of Usopp is shown to have more range than just to be fleshed out. And this alternate persona, or this character that he created, started to grow on the audience, grow on the fans, and became part of the whole One Piece journey. In fact, he kept that mask on for so long that he was in many episodes just wearing the mask alone, because he couldn't show his face as Usopp due to his personal shame. Moving on from that, we get to see even more story with regards to Nico Robin and why she's considered a devil, because not only did those 7 ships sank, but a lot of people died in the process. So whatever the gum fruit she ate is a thing that resides in her that's considered to be dark, that it could just destroy so many ships by itself from just a little girl. If a little girl, just a small little girl, could destroy so many ships, that the power of the fruit that she ate is something that's completely terrible, that not even Navy HQ could have stopped her. So it's essential to capture Nico Robin more than it's essential to capture someone like Luffy. I said this before at the beginning, that there are many of the characters, secondary protagonists, eventually will become so much more important than Luffy himself, that their stories start to revolve around them. And during Nico Robin's arc, is basically saying that she's even more important than the protagonist of the story. And that happened also with Nami at a certain point, and that also happened with Zoro at a certain point. And it's also happening with Nico Robin at a certain point. Luffy is still the main protagonist, but these are all individual, feels like various different protagonists of the story, because without Nico Robin, without Nami, without Zoro, the existence of One Piece would have been very linear and very limited. So moving on from that, we get to see Sogeking doing his own performance in front of Chopper and Luffy. They're amazed at his existence, even though everyone knows that it's Usopp. We then see Zoro in front of one of the CP9 unit guys, a swordsman, who looks like has a long nose and looks like a giraffe. Turns into a giraffe. Zoro eventually takes him out, and we're here at this point in the story where the second gear is now introduced. From the beginning of episode 1 to where we are right now, it's always been first gear. Second gear was introduced in the battle against Lucci. And Lucci is the leader of the CP9 unit, Cypher Pole 9, and there are a total of, I believe there are 10 Cypher Poles. If I'm mistaken, there might not be 10. It might actually be 9 Cypher Pole units. It goes from Cypher Pole 0 to Cypher Pole 9. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. As I guess in the story of One Piece, as the number in Cypher Pole goes down, it means that the group that's part of the Cypher Pole is strong. So if it goes from 9 to 7, it means that 7 is stronger than 9. And if it goes from 7 to like 4, it means that 4 is stronger than 7. But that's not the case. It turned out to be that it really depends on the person or the group of people that are within the Cypher Pole. Apparently, Zero is considered the strongest of the Cypher Pole groups, but that turns out to be untrue later on in the manga. Moving on, we get more context with regards to Luffy, that using his gum fruit by overheating his body turns him into a kid. If you abuse the power of the gum fruit to a certain degree to make yourself strong and to heat up your body to a certain condensed or format or a certain texture format, using heat to heat the body to turn it like hard ceramic rubber, or not really ceramic rubber, but hard plastic to become hard plastic to become almost as hard as steel. Eventually put a huge amount of stress on the body that once it's cooled off, the body shrinks, and that's what happens here. Luffy is turned into like a little kid version of himself because the body shrinks. Of course, he kicks Lucci's ass, and eventually, in the end, he destroys Luffy by finally turning and adapting to his Gear 2. When he first used the Gear 2 abilities, he wasn't able to control it, so he turned to a kid. But by finally using Gear 2 and adapt to Gear 2, he was able to finally be able to control Gear 2 to a certain level. And using his multiple punch hits against Lucci, same that he used against Crocodile to defeat Crocodile, basically doing the whole Jojo Aura thing against him, using Gear 2, overheated Gear 2 to make his fist super strong than before, that's like steel, multiple steels, or punching you at the same time. Lucci gets completely destroyed, and even though Lucci body is as hard as steel or stronger than steel, getting punched by something equal as hard as steel multiple times eventually crush this guy, and he gets obliterated by Luffy. The next story proceed forward. I guess the end of this arc comes with the appearance of the Mary, and it's assumed in this anime that the Mary kind of has a mind of itself, but it's not really the case. The case is just that the anime is trying to make Mary into something more than what it is. It's a belief that Mary has a spirit of its own, or the spirit of the ocean wants Mary to sail again. So Mary calls to this guy to build it. The guy builds it, fixes the Mary up. The Mary, on its final journey to save Luffy and the Straw Hat crew from drowning, saved them. They got onto the Mary, and eventually, after they were saved, the Mary cracked it. Its center got cracked open. Its final act of heroism, the ship's final act of heroism, was to save Luffy and the crew from certain death in the ocean after defeating the Cyberpole leaders. After the building crashed down, they were all going to drown. The Mary saved them as Navy HQ was surrounding them and they were about to die and get destroyed by Navy HQ. The Mary comes in clutch, saved them, and for one last save. And eventually, Luffy set the Mary on fire and sent the Mary off into the deep oceans where it could finally rest. So the ship itself saved them, which is completely weird, but that's how it is in One Piece. The ship has its own personality as well. It's not just Zoro, it's not just Nami, it's not just Luffy, it's not just Franklin or anyone else, or Chopper, or even Usopp. The Mary is a personality itself within One Piece. Yes, it's just a ship that carries them, but I believe past the 200th episode of One Piece, the Mary was more than just a ship. The Mary was an entity for which Luffy and the crew, went on their journeys over many, many arcs and the many, many years of One Piece before the 400th episode of One Piece. Eventually, the final flight of the crew of the Mary eventually got underway, and the Mary 2.0 was created, or I guess if you want to call it Mary 2.0, but it was a different form of the Mary was created. This form of the Mary had like a little bear head in the front of it, rather than before the Mary had like a ram's horn in front of it. So this one had like a little bear's head in front of it, and it was like the Mary 1.5 or the Mary 2.0, something like that. And they went into the next arc, and this was the Moria arc. This wasn't the one I really liked more than anything, but these were servants of the next warlord. And this next warlord wasn't that great. His art wasn't that great either. The only thing that great to come out of it was to discover that Kuma, or should I say Brook, and Kuma were, I won't say introduced here, were a major pivotal factor within the existence of this arc. So Brook was essential towards this arc, and he became an essential component towards the Mary and towards the Straw Hat Crew in future episodes of One Piece. So the introduction of Brook became essential towards One Piece in the long run. And the description of what this arc was good at the halfway point. Once it got past the halfway point, this arc kind of became bad. So this arc was so-so. Using shadows was the way of fighting in this anime. The shadow was the essential component to defeat your enemies. If you could defeat your enemies by stealing their shadow, you could use that shadow in order to use against your enemies, and you could use that dead body by reanimating that dead body to serve at your will while capturing the shadow and consuming the shadow so you could become stronger. And that's what eventually happens in this arc. The main warlord used all the shadows in order to make himself stronger and in order to try to defeat Luffy. During the process of the main fight with this main warlord, um, Bartholomew Kuma showed up to the island in order to capture Luffy. He eventually takes out the Straw Hat crew, while Luffy eventually defeats Moria. Um, and how he defeats it is by using his body in order to expand Moria's body so that the souls could come out. Eventually, all the souls leaked out of Moria's body. Um, I think I'm saying his name wrong, but defeat this guy. All the souls exit out of his body. He didn't die, or should I say, he didn't get taken out the traditional way that most of the enemies in One Piece got taken out. He just got taken out and defeated due to the souls extracting from his body, and that's how he got defeated. Not a great way to defeat a warlord of the Seven Seas, or one of the seven warlords. In fact, to me, he seems to be the the second weakest warlord of all the warlords. By doing so, it pushed forward for the strongest warlord, or I believe the fourth strongest warlord of the seven warlords, to show up to the party. And Bartholomew Kuma basically took out the entire one section of the entire island by using, or should I say, one section of the ship, or one section. No, how did it go? One section of the castle got taken out, as well as one section of the island got taken out by Bartholomew Kuma's powers. Basically, he did a whole Frieza thing. He expanded a bubble to a vast amount. That it was the size of a huge energy ball that Frieza does in Dragon Ball Z. But then he compressed that thing into a small little energy that's smaller than his finger. And then he threw that energy towards his enemies and then exploded outwards like a shockwave that Pain does in Naruto. And it crushes everything within his path. And buildings come falling down, trees get blown away. A section of the island gets destroyed, as well as half of if not the entire castle. Moria's castle got taken out. The Straw Hat crew got knocked out, or completely destroyed and knocked out. How they were alive, I don't know. But it's assumed that with the assistance of Nico Robin's abilities and other members of the crew's abilities, as well as, I guess, Moria's Brook, they managed to survive. So moving forward from that, it goes into the next story. So the next section of the story we see is the second admiral. And the second admiral, I forgot his name. There's Akainu and there's Aokiji, and I forgot his name. I'll remember it later on. So moving forward from that, we're introduced to the second admiral, and he's after Luffy as well. And he realized Aokiji couldn't capture Luffy, so he goes after Luffy by himself. And doing so, we'll go into the next arc of the story. So after Moria's defeat of that warlord, we're going to the next arc, and we're part of another story. And this second arc is a representation of another faction within various different group of the Grand Line. And this faction is basically a part of a group of pirates trying to overthrow the government secretly. They would never say so, but or it's assumed that they're trying to overthrow the government secretly by, I guess, outwitting or outsmarting Navy HQ. And they do so in many ways by aligning themselves with various old pirates from Whitebeard's crew, as well as other pirates that are located within the vicinity on this island. However, it doesn't go the way you would think it would go with regards to Luffy himself. He, on the other hand, after fighting Bartholomew Kuma, gets obliterated by Kuma and gets cast away. It's assumed that he died, but that's not the case. So moving forward from that, go into the next story, and this next story has to do with another island, and this island is an island full of women. So, in context with regards to what's going on here, we see that this character Luffy is ejected, destroyed by Bartholomew Kuma, and launched into the sky. And for days on end, he flies through the sky. And why? This is the only thing I'm a little confused within the story of One Piece. Why did they not kill? Why did Kuma did not kill him? I do not know. I don't understand this, but making him go away was not really a smart choice. Or perhaps it was never intended for him to go away. But Kuma is not really loyal to pirates, so it does not make sense that Luffy would still be alive. That's the only thing within One Piece I was always confused of. Why didn't he completely die? Why did he just fly away for days on end in the sky? Landing on this place introduced new characters, new faction within the whole Grand Line story and One Piece itself. They're very much Amazon type. They represent a group of individuals trying to achieve their own personal ends. It's not described that they're pirates, so to speak. They're more described as people who are living part of a village away from the rest of society, very much like Amazons. How that story plays out is not, I guess it's not one of the best stories within the One Piece universe. The Boa arc, or however you want to call it, Women of the Island arc. It's then later revealed during Luffy's process of flying through the air, like he's going straight Superman for days on end without stopping. He lands on this island um, of these women, and it's during this period of him being on this island, Ace is captured by the government. And once he's captured by the government, they're going to officially have a date of execution for Ace, the son of a very famous pirate. It's not revealed during the process of this manga who this character is, who this pirate is, but it's assumed that he's the son of Whitebeard, and it's assumed that he's the son of Dragon as well. A criminal who's not really a pirate, just a criminal who was a personal friend of Gold Roger, the king of the pirates. So he's captured, and the story of his capture is basically told throughout the manga. And through this Luffy's journey on this island, he's told of Ace's capture through the warlord that's on this island. And the warlord that's on this island is called Boa Karn. So I'm not going through Boa Karn's whole warlord story or Island of the Women story, because that was one of the worst ones within all of One Piece history. There are several throughout One Piece history, and there are many that could have been done without it. I believe there are a total of 5 different arcs that One Piece could have gotten rid of that weren't essential towards the development of its journey throughout the entire beginning, middle, and ending. So moving on from that, the next second, or should I say, the next sequence of stories revolve around going into a prison, removing certain characters from a prison, and then go saving these people from this prison in order to attain enough forces to free Ace from captivity by Navy headquarters. Once that is done, the story considerably moved forward even more. And inside this prison arc, which I will call the prison arc, is actually one of the good ones. Not good because of so much the story. It's good with regards to the different characters you meet within the prison. These are all past criminals from Luffy's past when he first got introduced within this anime or within the manga. Various bosses he defeated in the past all got sent to prison here because Luffy doesn't kill his enemies, so they're all typically captured within this era. So the prison arc is more like, I guess you could say, reminder of who all the bad guys Luffy fought in the past were in one place. So Crocodile's people, Buggy's people, Don Creek's people were all in here. So Prison Arc is a representation of Luffy needing some of these people he beat from his past in order to save Ace. And why they would assist Luffy to save Ace is because each of these pirates from the past, not so much Don Creek, but each of the pirates from the past associated with Ace, as were associated with Ace at one point or another in his past. Not all people Luffy fought in various different arcs were associated with Ace, but certain people were associated with Ace. In other words, a warlord was associated with Ace. His name is Jinbei. Crocodile's people were associated with Ace in the past, so they're going to go and help him save him. Buggy was associated with Ace in the past, so Buggy's going to go and help him. Even Crocodile himself is going to help, not because he wanted to save Ace, but because he used to be part of the Whitebeard Pirates, which Ace used to be part of as well. So many things are being revealed within the prison arc that weren't revealed before, attached towards the Ace storyline and the Whitebeard storyline. So more stories with regards to what One Piece is, or what the characters within One Piece are being fleshed out here, more so than previous arc did in the past. This is another character here. I'm not going to get into this character. This character is very much a representation of Kiss, the music group, the rock and roll music group from the past. And this is also a character that was part of Crocodile's crew, willing to help. Moving forward from there, this character on the far left is Jinbei, who was a warlord who refused to help in the assassination of, or the capture of Ace, because Ace saved his life once in the past. So his title of warlordship was given to someone else. Moving on from there, we get to the next scene where we see the character known as Blackbeard showed up to the party again. So the prison arc is very important towards the future of One Piece, because many characters, new characters get revealed here, and many characters from the past get brought back to show that they didn't go away, that they're still part of the major end game role towards what One Piece is. So we got to see new characters get introduced. The gentleman on the right is a new character, and the gentleman on the left is a character we met before. So moving on from that, Buggy and his crew finally escapes. They're on Luffy's ship, Mary 1.5 if you want to call him. And so Buggy is basically being revered as a champion or something. This is the first time we get context into Buggy's history and Buggy's past. It wasn't mentioned before in previous One Piece episodes, from beginning of the first appearance of Buggy to episode 100, 200. Nothing about what Buggy was from the past was revealed until now. So Buggy was not only on Whitebeard's crew, but actually no. So Buggy wasn't on Whitebeard's crew. Buggy was on Gold Roger's crew. So apparently Buggy is the most famous person within One Piece at the moment that we've seen so far, because he was part of Gold Roger's crew, the original OG pirate team, the warlord, or should I say, the king of the pirates. He was originally on the crew of the king of the pirates, one of their crew members. And so he's a rare character within One Piece, because he's one of the surviving members of the Gold Rogers. That would make Buggy almost as old as Whitebeard. So Buggy doesn't look old, but he's very old. As old as Whitebeard is. Not older, because Whitebeard is like 60 or 70 years old, I believe. So Buggy's like 50 or something years old. I believe he's like 50 or something like that. 40 or 50, something like that. So moving on from there, we get to see Ace get sent out to the gallows, or going to his execution, rocking the Whitebeard pirate tattoo on his back, to show to the audience that he considers Whitebeard his true father. And even though we've never realized this before. The anime then tells you that Gold Roger is Whitebeard's real father, and this revelation only comes at the point of where Ace is about to be killed. So on that place, on that plateau where Ace is about to die, it's revealed verbally by a vice admiral. So Sengoku, Vice Admiral Sengoku reveals this to the public, the general public. Once taking cameras, recording videos, blah blah blah. That Ace is not the son of the legendary criminal dragon. That Ace is the son of Gold Roger. And this revelation is revealed and is very important because for decades it's assumed that every offspring of Gold Roger were killed off. And killed. Why they were killed off? Because he was the king of the pirates. And why would you kill off someone's offspring? Simply because they're the king of the pirates. Because Gold Roger attained One Piece. And apparently, I'm not 100% sure of this, but whatever fruit Gold Roger had, it's assumed that that fruit, which is associated with One Piece, is the most powerful fruit in all existence. It's not stated what type. If Gold Roger had the gum gum fruit, the anime would have said he had the gum gum fruit. So whatever fruit he had, or whatever powers he had, the government feared it more than they feared Nico Robin's powers, more than they feared Whitebeard's powers, more than they feared Dragon's powers, or more than they feared any powers that the seven warlords of the sea have. His powers is equal to that of an emperor of the sea. And there are only 4 emperors of the sea in the entire world. An emperor is basically someone who rules out an entire country, obviously. But these emperors that rule off these countries are emperors that are in charge of various different activities throughout the world. The world government is not ruled by an emperor, but the world government, I guess you could say, are the, like I said before, are the United Nations of these emperors. They are one singular ruling body that keep things in place, while other people who rule their nation support the world government. That's the best way to describe it. The world government of the 5 great elders aren't powerful than these nations. They're just a separate, the world government is just its own separate empire, while these 4 different empires are their own. So each of these empires are like 4 different countries throughout the world, gigantic countries that ruled gigantic parts of the Grand Line, both the east and the west side of the Grand Line, north and south. You could basically say north, south, east, and west are controlled by each one of these different emperors, and that the world government is not control each part of these different part of the oceans. They're just the main figurehead there to keep everything stable between these 4 empires or emperors. Yes, each of these emperors are very much more powerful than the world government themselves, or can crush the world government by themselves if they wanted to, with their military might. However, by themselves, it would be foolish to try to go up against the world government by themselves. They would have to team up with another empire to completely obliterate the world government. But by themselves, they could pretty much do it if they really wanted to. That's how powerful these empires are. They're equally as powerful as the world government itself by themselves. So knowing that type of fear, knowing that these emperors exist, and that they're far more powerful than any warlord, far more powerful than individuals within the world government, pretty much they allow the world government to do as they want, or the world government allow them to do as they want, because the world government can't stop these empires. The fear of letting Ace survive is equal to the fear of letting one of the empire start a war with the world government. Ace offspring, or should I say, Gold Roger's offspring, surviving is equal to the fear of starting a war with one of these empires. So he's more important than anyone in the world at the moment. So removing this obstacle from the planet is very pivotal towards the continuing existence of the world government. If Ace is allowed to exist, then destruction of the world government will come to exist. However, that's not the case here. We get to see context with regards to Ace's mother. We get to see context with regards to Ace and Luffy. I'm trying to get the Ace, or should I say, Luffy and Usopp, and Kuri trying to get the Ace. We get to see Buggy pretending to be a god in order to have everyone follow him, and knowing that he's an annoyance, but at the same time he's the most funniest person within One Piece. And eventually, I have this strange feeling he might come in clutch towards the end of One Piece, because it's so ridiculous how people are just blinded by who he is, that they think of him to be some type of god, even though he's like a clown to everyone else that knows he's just this joke. But bizarrely, people follow him. It's really weird, but it's really hilarious at the same time. So what happens? They bust into Navy HQ. Luffy finally enters Navy HQ, crashes the party, shows up to Navy HQ. Luffy falls from the sky with everyone within the crew, and they all, out of getting ejected from the Merry. I don't know how they actually got launched into the air, to be honest with you, from the water. But they fall from the sky like they were all parachuting down to save Ace. Ace, everyone within Navy HQ, the 7 warlords, the 3 admirals, vice admirals, all the people and townspeople, village people, the entire Navy HQ, Akiyuno, everyone saw tons and tons and tons of pirates fall from the sky. It's one of the most memorable parts of all of One Piece. In all of anime history is like rain of individual pirates just rained down from the sky like it was falling rain. It was epic, and that epic fight continues within, I guess you could call this the Saving Ace arc. After the Princess arc was over, you could call this one the Saving Ace arc, or taking down the Navy HQ arc, because that's what I call it, taking down Navy HQ arc. So once Luffy got there, they rescue Ace, they saved him, removed them from being executed. Ace is saved. Fight happens. Eventually, Ace is not saved. Akiyuno, the strongest of, or supposedly strongest of the 3 admirals, punches his hand through Ace, and because Ace is very powerful, but he's not as powerful as an admiral. The only people that could take on an admiral is Whitebeard and Gold Roger. If you're not Whitebeard and you're not Gold Roger, or you're not an emperor, you're not going to win against an admiral. So Ace lost. He got a fist punch right through his chest. Luffy is about to die. In fact, Luffy almost died. If it wasn't for the assistance of the other pirates, he would have been completely dead. Luffy loses it, goes unconscious. Akiyuno attacks him, is about to kill him. Eventually, that does not happen. Once again, coming in clutch, Whitebeard, realizing that Akiyuno just killed Ace, popped up behind Akiyuno. Akiyuno is basically, you could basically call this man dead man walking. In fact, the reason why Whitebeard is cast in complete darkness is a identification that Akiyuno is not going to survive this arc, and he doesn't. Eventually, he gets pummeled to the ground, and so much so that he got completely crushed and got beaten the shit out of. Basically, Whitebeard mops the floor with him. He puts up a fight later on, because Whitebeard's already hurt, but Whitebeard basically destroys this guy, to the point that he crushes his ribs, completely on the inside, destroying his internal organs completely, and destroying all of Navy 8's crew with one huge explosion. And this huge explosion from his sword, or from his power himself, since his gum gum fruit, or should I say his devil fruit, is a representation of air pressure, destroys the ground, destroys the building, the castle crashes down, and Akiyuni falls into a huge pit, or should I say fall directly into the earth, completely defeated. Of course, he gets back up later on because his devil powers allow him to survive. So he managed to survive, but he'll be a cripple for the rest of his life, or at least he'll have internal injuries for the rest of his life. Um, all that happened with him was his ribs and his internal organs are completely destroyed, so he'll always be, on that medical bag for the remainder of his days. He can no longer fight anyone extremely powerful after that completely destruction of his internal organs. So Akiyuni is out of the picture. So the final part of this arc, coming towards the end, I would say would have to be Marshall D. Teach showing up to finish off Whitebeard. Originally, people thought, well, Akiyumi got one final punch on Whitebeard. That's not the case. The person that actually officially killed Whitebeard, officially killed him, that did that final blow, that completed the final blow, was Marshall D. Teach, his former pirate on his ship. A former, I forgot what Whitebeard called him. It's not a traitor, it's someone who was pretending to be one of his children. Someone pretending to be a pirate on his ship. Basically, Whitebeard said Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard, was the only pirate on his ship that was never really one of his sons, or never really one of the crew, was someone that was pretending the whole time to be one of his people. And this is true, because Blackbeard's intentions was never to be part of Whitebeard's crew. His ambitions was to do and achieve something that was beyond being part of Whitebeard's crew. His personal ambitions were to destroy the Whitebeard crew, to sabotage the Whitebeard crew, and to serve him up to the government hook, line, sinker, so that they could give him certain allowances or privileges in order to go beyond the Grand Line and to attain the power or the responsibility of a warlord, so that he could do whatever he wants. So his intentions was always to become a warlord by sabotaging and giving up Ace to the government, and then giving up Whitebeard also to the government by luring Whitebeard in to save Ace. So he was the person that basically sabotaged everyone and allowed for Ace to die and allowed for Whitebeard to die and for many of the pirates to be captured and to be killed. So that's why I say this guy is very bad. Equal to the, I would say even more so, or maybe even equal so than Flamingo. He might actually be worse than Flamingo, to be honest with you. Why I say this is, even though I believe Flamingo might actually be worse than him, but the anime might not put that as Flamingo as being worse than him, simply because his powers of his devil fruit is completely black. It's like night and day. His powers is represented by the opposite of the sun, which is complete darkness. So his gum gum fruit is the gum gum fruit of dark, or should I say, well, I keep calling it gum gum fruit. His powers is the devil fruit of darkness. So his fruit is to cancel out anyone who has devil fruit's power. So if you use the devil fruit power against him, you can not only cancel it out. His fruit powers comes in two formulas. One, cancel out. Two, adapt. Three, steal. Four, use. So he has the ability to not only adapt to any devil fruit's power used against him, he has the ability to cancel out your devil fruit powers when you're fighting him, and the ability to steal your devil fruit powers and use it to his advantage against you. So he's the most powerful devil fruit user in all of One Piece history, because not only can he use devil fruit powers, he could claim any devil fruit powers for himself and use that power at will whenever he wants to after he collected. He's very much like what's his name from Mortal Kombat, Shang Tsung. He was very much a Shang Tsung type. He could attain the power of anyone and use that power to his advantage at full capacity. Or if for better use with regards to the anime world, he's very much like a Kurapika type, like a dark Kurapika or an evil Kurapika, where he could use all forms of Nen in order to become a specialist. You could basically call Blackbeard a specialist amongst devil fruit user. He's not a normal devil fruit user that's locked into one type of or two type of devil fruits. He could use multiple devil fruits and use them to his advantage. So he's probably the most powerful devil fruit user of all times. Eventually, this may play out later in the manga. He hasn't gotten to that level yet. But like I said, he's basically the night to Luffy's day. So whatever he has, the opposite of this would be said for Luffy. And this will show in the manga later on. It hasn't showed up yet, but it's getting very close to that final battle between him and Teach happening one day. Not this year, probably not next year, but it will happen. Eventually, everyone remembers Whitebeard. Whitebeard dies. Whitebeard gets killed by Blackbeard's crew. They all shoot him up, stab him, however else. Every single one of these people are going to get destroyed in the end. And it's not going to be like how Luffy defeat his previous enemy, they all get locked up. I have a feeling all these dudes are going to literally get killed in the end. Not by Luffy or his crew, but probably by someone else. And if they do get killed by Luffy and his crew, it won't be done by Luffy himself. Luffy is passed on as this type of hero of the story that destroys his enemy, but he doesn't kill his enemy. He's very much like a Superman type. So if each of these guys are going to die, they're going to either be killed by Sanji or by Zoro, because Zoro is not willing to shy away from killing his opponents. Moving on from that, we see Whitebeard dying, looking at HQ as it crumbles, and people remembering Whitebeard and history of what Whitebeard is. When Whitebeard was a young buck, when his white beard wasn't white, and then eventually he became white as he gathered more people on his crew, and his yellow hair eventually became white hair until his white hair became no hair and was only his beard that remained, and his white curved beard. And eventually every single member throughout the various different decades got on the crew and were represented by Whitebeard and the Whitebeard Priors. They carried his name, they carried his sigil, they carried his insignia and who they were, all the way from Buggy, well, not really Buggy, all the way from Ace, all the way to Teach betraying Ass, to I believe even, what was his name? I forgot his name. I don't remember. All right, so moving on from that, we get to see a small little history of who Whitebeard was. This arc was very important. It wasn't just about saving Ace. It was about remembering Ace and remembering Whitebeard. When Ace died, his father also died. That's what was so important about this part of One Piece. It's the most important arc out of all of One Piece arc, because it was an era of One Piece that ended to start a new era of One Piece. It's where Luffy separates himself from being this type of character of who he's always been to now taking the responsibility and being this other type of character, which he needs to be in order to become the king of the pirates. So by the death of Ace and by the death of Whitebeard, we get context into how Luffy is slowly evolved, remembering who they were, and never giving up in pursuing his dreams. So Whitebeard says the most important thing to him is to have a family. This was when he was part of someone else's crew, when he was very young, when he was not as powerful as he was, even though he was strong when he was young. He was part of someone else's pirate hood, and he told them that he wanted to have a family when he got older. Eventually, he ended up having a family, and everyone that was on his crew was his family. So he didn't have a traditional family in the sense of wife, kids, and that, but his family was his crew, and he treated all of them as his sons. Each individual that were part of his crew was his sons, and he would fight to death for his sons. And eventually, that's what happened. He went to save Ace, fought to death for his son to save his son. He would not have left there alive without his son. And in the end, he died trying to save his son. That's why this is the most important arc in all of One Piece, because it's not just an arc about Luffy evolution. It's an arc about sending One Piece into, separate One Piece into sections. The age of how things were in the past to the age of how things will be in the future is pivotal. Moving forward, we go into the next arc. We see new characters show up. We see, I forgot what is his name? He has a very famous name. It's Hyena. Yeah, that's his name, Hyena. I got it completely wrong. This guy with the spike hair is Hyena. The other guy isn't Hyena. I'm completely wrong. I forgot the name of the other guy. Started with a B. I knew his name was B something, but this guy's Hyena. Now I remember his face. His name is Hyena, a red-haired guy. He's running his own pirates, running his own crew. Eventually, he shows up to the party. He's new to the whole thing. He showed up in the previous arc before, but eventually he's going to the New World. And the New World is the arc that follows thereafter. It's the one that we're on right now. So upon Whitebeard and the old world, or should I say, the Grand Line, one half of the Grand Line story ending, which is the half of the Grand Line associated with everything from One Piece to episode 1 to episode 500, moving on from episode 500 plus, or I believe from episode 400 plus, 500 plus, even more so, more episodes, probably more than that. We get to go into the 800th episode or the 700th episode. So I believe from 600, 700 moving on, we're going into the New World arcs. And from the New World arcs, we get to see past the 700s into 700s to 800s. 600 is going to 700, 700 is going into 800 episodes, are all considered going into the New World arcs or part of the New World arcs. So you could say when this was happening, rescuing Ace is the first transition towards that New World arc. So upon the New World arc, we get to see Hyena and his crew. The people there saying that how this land is ruled by a guy named Kaido. And Kaido is the emperor of these lands. And the guys who meet this robotic guy with a Gatling gun arm basically say, well, this is just an island, a large island and a large land as part of the New World. How could this guy rule? Well, they didn't ask how could he rule, but asked, oh, we don't care about his ruling. They don't know who Kaido is. Not a lot of people does, because this is the first introduction to the name of who Kaido is. And Kaido is the guy that Loki fights in episode 1600 or 1500. Maybe not 1500. Episode 1050 all the way to episode 1073. He's the main boss of this New World arc. And the New World arc is over 100 episodes long. It's the longest running arc in One Piece history, because the New World arc has many arcs attached to its arc. That's why I was saying one section of One Piece is done. Once the New World arc starts, it's basically cutting the pie that is One Piece in half. One section of the pie was the Grand Line on the east side. The other section of One Piece is the Grand Line on the west side. And this section of One Piece is about Luffy's maturity into becoming an adult. Not just his maturity in body, what is maturity in the decisions he's making, the decisions for the future, decisions for finally finding the One Piece, and decision for how he deals with everything in life after Ace and Whitebeard are finally gone. That he will now have to become the Pirate King in order to become a character like Whitebeard, to become the new Whitebeard, or to become the new Gold Roger. The only way to do so is to finish the journey of the new world, the new arc, or should I say, the new part of One Piece. So this is the separation point within One Piece, where what was old is done, what is new is continue on. So the introduction of Kaido starts very early within the New World arc. It took more than, I believe, more than 50 episodes before Kaido even was shown, before the image of Kaido was even shown. In fact, it took probably more than 60 episodes going in before the character of Kaido was even shown. He was that much of a big deal. He's very much a Negan in The Walking Dead. So eventually, the story continues years later on their travels towards the New World, on the seas of the high seas of travels towards the New World. They get into a couple of trouble, but time skips. This is the first time skip within One Piece. Not only to show that Luffy has matured, both mentally and physically and psychologically. He is very much an immature person. Um, but how he would deal with the new journeys and the new discoveries and the new evolution of himself and the entire crew. This is the second part of One Piece. This is the second half of the full pizza pie. The first half is done. The first journey of One Piece is done. The New World offers new and vast amount of riches and vast amount of accomplishments and vast amount of exploration. And things that we've never seen in One Piece are now going to be explored in One Piece. One Piece ship, the new Mary, can now travel underwater using technology from the Mer people in order to keep the ship in a bubble and to travel underwater. Other than that, we meet new characters and we learn that Pluton, the original thing that Crocodile wanted in order to rule over everyone, to become more powerful in the world or equal to that of an emperor. It's said to be that Pluton is just one of many type of weapons in order to rule over everyone. Pluton is basically like nukes, or the element of what Pluton was is basically the nuke, the more powerful nuke of all nukes. But as we go into the New World arc, we've learned that there are two other powerful weapons equal to that of Pluton. And it's these three type of weapons. Anyone who wields one of these three type of weapons can rule the world. If you have Pluton and you're able to use Pluton, you could rule the world. If you have Poseidon, which is another power, which is this character right here, the embodiment of this power imbued within this character, you could rule the world. And if you have another weapon, I forgot the name of the other one. It was Leviathan or Nephanus or something like that. It's Poseidon, is Pluton, and something else. If you have all three of these things, no one could stop you basically. Or even if you have one of these things, no one will be able to stop you if you know how to use these things as part of a weapon. Because Pluton is very much like plutonium needed in order to create a nuke. And Poseidon is basically like an element to a component in order to put into a weapon in order to rule over everyone and everything within the oceans. And so if you have at least one of these things, you could rule. So this was introduced within the New World arc, that Pluton is more than what it is. First introduced in the old arc, or the old world, or within the first part of Grand Line. Fleshing out what was Pluton wasn't it did not exist then. But in the New World stories, what Pluton exists is far beyond what people knew within the One Piece world. So moving on from that, we get to learn of a guy whose name is no, he's not Kaido. He's Kishimon, or Kishimon or something like that. Moving on from that, I'm not even going to get into it. We get to see the servant of Flamingo, and the servant of Flamingo basically plans on killing Luffy, and the whole Straw Hat crew at Flamingo's beck and call. She basically decides to kill everyone on the island that Luffy and everyone showed up to in the New World in order to get towards where the One Piece is, because they're closing in on the One Piece. Every time, for every journey and every arc, they get closer to the One Piece Flamingo doesn't believe that the One Piece exists, but Luffy and his crew doesn't need Flamingo to know that One Piece exists. And since Flamingo needs to destroy Luffy in order to gain more power within the five great elders of the world government, um, taking him out finally would make him become superpowered more than a warlord. Would give him uh, total power in order to do whatever he wants beyond that scope of a warlord. But that doesn't happen. Apparently, another pirate by the name of Law has this ability in order to switch out people's hearts. And what he did is he took his heart out, gave it to the tyrant of this place, and during this art, he pretended that the heart that he gave to this tyrant was his own, but he gave this tyrant the heart of his servant, which was this girl. Um, and then the tyrant eventually gave him back his heart, and he exchanged his heart by giving the tyrant this woman's heart. Because as it said, or should I say, as it goes within the manga and the anime, um, this tyrant wanted to kill Smoker, and eventually Law fooled this tyrant into believing that he had Smoker's heart. So when he stabbed Smoker's heart, which wasn't really Smoker's heart, he stabbed this woman's heart, and she died. And she was never able to push the button to kill Luffy and destroy the entire island, along with the dictator that was on the island, along with Law, and along with Hyena and other pirates that were on the island. So that's how bad Flamingo is. Flamingo was willing to sacrifice his own people to kill Law's pirates, to kill Hyena's pirates, to kill Luffy's pirates, to kill Whitebeard's pirates in one fell swoop. So it doesn't work the way he wanted to. Realizing that, realizing that he screwed up, realizing that he didn't get killed, Smoker didn't die, Flamingo realizing that he failed in his mission, and the dictator ended up getting his ass kicked and not being able to kill Smoker, decide he's going to go in and take things on his own and destroy Luffy by himself. Pretty much at this point, he's extremely pissed off that every attempt that he made to kill Luffy has failed. Especially since his plans is foolproof in order to attain his goals, to become more powerful than a warlord and to become emperor level. Why we later find out within the new world why that is. You see, Kaido is pretty much has his arms in everything: gunfare, warfare, deception, military might, illegal gambling, the whole 9 yards, all types of bad things. And I believe Flamingo is a minion of Kaido. At least I'm assuming, based on what I remember, Flamingo is a minion of Kaido, or at least they work in cohesion towards each other for personal gains that they both can benefit from. So it's believed that Flamingo is a minion of Kaido. At least it's assumed that Flamingo is a minion of Kaido. But the manga, I don't believe the manga ever stated that it is. It's just assumed that he's a minion of Kaido. He wants to help Kaido to help himself. By defeating Luffy, he does that not just to help the five great elders of the world government, but also to help Kaido. Because hidden in the background is the story of Kaido. Everything that's happened in One Piece happens for a reason. So stories that happen within the grand lines, first half of the story of One Piece, were somehow connected toward Kaido of the New World. Because Kaido has his hand in governmental affairs as well. So whatever is going on within the five elders is somehow connected to what's going on with Kaido as well. So everything that the world government has been trying to do in One Piece since Luffy defeated Crocodile is somehow associated with Kaido. Moving on from that, we get to a point where we see Various different characters popping up, various different pirates popping up, willing to help each other in order to take down Kaido. I'm not going to get too deep into it because I'm now 3 hours in for this video, but I'm going to push forward even more. Eventually, CP9, or should I say CP0, called Aegis Zero, is the original CP unit, could be considered the original CP unit or the most powerful CP unit, and they wear white clothes in comparison to CP9 who wear black clothes. They're sent to the New World in order to capture Nico Robin and to defeat Luffy, capture Luffy as well, capture or kill both of them. But it's mostly to capture them because the government wants to use Nico Robin's powers as well as use Luffy's powers as well. So the main objective is to capture them. Eventually, Luffy learns Gear 3 during his process of fighting in the New World. And Gear 3, he used Gear 3 against Flamingo and Flamingo's minions. And he makes his arm grow huge. Eventually, he fights certain enemies within an arena, like gladiatorial arena set up and controlled by Flamingo's people, who are basically I forgot their names. I'm not even going to try. Every time I try to remember something, it's not going to go my way. It's like trying to remember everything that you ever learned from anything. So he is fighting in this gladiatorial arena. He defeats the enemies within this gladiatorial arena. And this whole place is controlled by a family who are under Flamingo's powers. So by defeating them, he finally gets to fight the boss of this family who serves Flamingo. And since Flamingo is pissed off that nothing is working his way, finally decides to go and fight Luffy because Luffy finally destroyed the last people who served them under his Don Quixote, and got destroyed by his those who serve him. So by fighting Flamingo, finally, Luffy is able to meet his brother, or should I say, an adopted brother that was part of his family for when he was a kid. You see, Luffy had Ace when he was growing up, but he also had Sabo when he was growing up. There were 3 kids when he was young under Whitebeard pirates. Was Luffy, there was Sabo, and there was Ace. Ace was the oldest of the group, and then there was Sabo. Well, I'm not sure how old Sabo is, but Ace and Sabo are assumed to have been around the same age, or close to around the same age, or Sabo is supposed to be a little bit older than Luffy, and Ace is supposed to be a little bit older than Sabo, or it could be that Sabo's and Ace are around the same age, but regardless, they were all little kids together. Luffy was a kid, Sabo was a kid, Ace were a kid. They all grew up together under the wings of Whitebeard and Shanks. So here in the arena arc, I call this the arena arc because it's like a gladiatorial arena. Luffy takes on all of Flamingo's cronies that serve him, defeating them within the gladiatorial arena, and eventually fights a Flamingo, and eventually meets Sabo, who is the leader of the Revolutionary Army, or chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army, not the leader himself. The leader of that Revolutionary Army happens to be Luffy's father, Dragon, which is shown in the manga. I'm not going to show it here. But yeah, eventually Luffy gets to meet his adopted brother, who is part of the whole crew. Eventually show up to be part of the merry crew for his time being within the manga. Eventually he went his own way. I'm not even sure he was part of the crew, but he was part of the whole gladiatorial arc, but went on his own way and went back to his father, which is Luffy's original father, Dragon, his real father anyway, and they're working together. And so Luffy finally fights Flamingo for the very first time within both One Piece. From the moment Flamingo was introduced within One Piece to now, it's been many years, and it's been over 300 episodes. Probably no, it's been more than 400 episodes of from the moment Flamingo was introduced to where we're are right now with regards to Flamingo. So it's been a total of since season 2. No, Flamingo was introduced in season 1. Since season 1, the introduction of Flamingo, we finally got to this point. So 800 episodes, 7 to 800 episodes in of everything that's going on in the new world. Flamingo gets his comeuppance, he gets destroyed, and yeah, 900 times. Yeah, during somewhere from between 600 to 700, going on to the 800 episode, Flamingo gets destroyed by Luffy. They get into this huge fight, not within the arena or around somewhere around the area of the arena. Gear 4 is now initiated within the new world, and Gear 4 is called the Bouncing Man because Luffy turns his body into hard rubber, but hard rubber that's bouncy like a basketball, basically. Super hard rubber. The exterior extremely hard, but the internal air is compressed to a degree that it makes his body unable to be stabilized on the floor. So he basically turned into a giant gorilla. Basically, a giant gorilla that's super strong like a gorilla, but as light as air itself. So doing so, Flamingo thought he had the upper hand because him going into another gear is no big deal to Flamingo. But Flamingo lacked to understand that gears going into different gears means like going into Super Saiyan, from Super Saiyan 1 to Super Saiyan 2. That's what Gear 4 basically means. Like going from Super Saiyan 1 to Super Saiyan 2. They're vastly different. Super Saiyan 1 is strong, but Super Saiyan 2 is beyond Super Saiyan 1. It's basically like a guy that's in physical fitness videos or in physical fitness magazines versus a guy that looks like, The Rock. There are two type of bodybuilder types. There's the one that's extremely cut and extremely big, but you could tell he's just cut and big to represent how a guy would look physically fit for a magazine, compared to someone that looks like The Rock. So that's the difference between the power strength and the power ability. Speed is another story. So what happens here, Gear 4 basically means he's like powerful level strength. He's like Titan level strength. And so Flamingo underestimated the strength of this ability is like Frieza underestimated when Goku first turned into a Super Saiyan. Flamingo gets wiped out easily. Eventually, all the people that served under Flamingo is you get a little history with regards to them. That how ruthless he is, how ruthless Flamingo is, all the people who served him, those under his thumb, those who were supporting him, those who claimed to be his friend, how he used all of them. This guy is really the worst of the worst. Second next to Blackbeard, or around the same. So yeah, when he gets destroyed, Luffy basically creates the same thing he did when he did Gear 2. He used Gear 2's speed of his multiple punches and Gear 3's ability to expand his body to a vast degree. But Gear 4 is basically compressed of both Gear 2, Gear 3, and 1 at the same time, using his Gear 4 powers, which is basically manipulating heat to make his body go even faster than he could before, at the same time making it go strong at or lightning speed. It's hard to describe it. These gears aren't exactly easy to describe. It's very strange, but basically means he just goes to another level, like a Super Saiyan 1 going to a Super Saiyan 2, basically. He knocks the hell out of Flamingo, KOs this guy. Nothing he could do about it, no matter how powerful Flamingo is. You cannot defeat someone who's excel past his limits. So he gets knocked the hell out of. He gets destroyed, and everything of Flamingo's past, everything ambition, everything he's built, his arena, his city he ruled over, all the people who served on him, all the people who manipulate, comes crashing to the ground. And all that's left in Luffy's wake now is Kaido, and the emperors that are supposedly to be the most powerful in all of One Piece history. Those who rule over all within the One Piece universe, the emperors. So, in relations towards defeating the most powerful of the warlords, Flamingo, finally defeating the most powerful of the warlords, Flamingo, ending him finally. Flamingos and all the warlords are now of the past. What's more powerful than warlords? Admirals. What's more powerful than admirals? Emperors. So, by defeating warlords, Luffy has now finally made it so that he's equal to the level of an admiral in strength. So now all he has to do is to defeat those who are more powerful than admirals, since he's now at the level and strength level of an admiral. And those are emperors. So the journey towards defeating Kaido is now underway. And Kaido is a dictator like all dictators. The only difference between him and Kaido and Flamingo, is that Kaido goes by a certain type of code. That's all. Without Kaido's code, Kaido is very much a Flamingo type. And because Kaido is extremely powerful and an emperor, and emperors have to rule in a certain way over those who are under them, even though he's a dictator type and an evil type, and obviously he's a pirate. He was a pirate before he became an emperor and a king. Those who he killed and those who he ruled over and those who he sabotaged in order to attain those powers never forgot who he was. And they've spent more than a decade trying to take him down in the New World. So while Luffy was getting strong and trying to take out the admirals and trying to take out the warlords and try to take out peon type pirate lords and or would-be pirate, pretentious pirate kings and escaping prison and stuff, people have been fighting against Kaido for more than a decade in order to try to take him down on the new side of the New World. Probably more than 20 years plus. Actually, more than 20 years. People have been fighting against a war, a long war, the longest war in One Piece history against Kaido. And Luffy just happens to end up right in between this decades upon decades of war against him. It's probably been 30 years since the events of Gold Roger's capture, Gold Roger's death, or 20 or so years. 25 or 30 years have been the last time since Gold Roger was present on the land of the New World and fought against Kaido's armies, along with Whitebeard. So that said, that should tell you how long people have been fighting against Kaido. Kaido eventually destroyed the previous rulers of this land and took over as usurper of the emperor's seat, the original emperor of these lands, and ruled over the emperor of these lands as the warlord or the shogun of this area. So the original emperor of this land has been in a war against Kaido for more than 20 years. Luffy showing up to the party decided to assist this emperor and go head-to-head against this emperor. And he had to fight through the emperor's peons on the way. But eventually, by fighting the emperor on the way, Luffy finally, I think, past episode 900. Yes, it was past episode 900 that he finally got in contact with Kaido, and finally got in contact and standing in the hallway of Kaido, in the throne room of Kaido, to finally see and hear who Kaido is, and Kaido finally to be able to address Luffy. And then Kaido sent his minions, his personal bodyguards, to fight Luffy and the Straw Hat crew past episode 900. And everything past episode 900 leading to episode 1000 is Luffy and the Straw Hat crew fighting Kaido themselves. So that said, let's see, what else? Yes. Okay, so this is a minion of. Okay, so the ancient dragon devil fruit is what it's called. The devil fruit of the dragon. By doing so, devil fruit of the dragon, we finally get to see what the type of devil fruit that Kaido uses. And once Kaido used this devil fruit, it's stated that he could pass on the power of this devil fruit to other people as well. Um, I'm not sure if he split up his devil fruit and gave it to different people after he ate it so they could gain powers as well, or if they all found um, the devil dragon fruit, ancient devil dragon fruit. But it's assumed that they each found individual dragon fruits, but it's not 100% identified if he actually found it or not. I'm not sure with regards to the dragon, the ancient dragon devil fruit. I'm not going to get into that either. What I would say is that moving forward, we get to meet a character called Oden, who was part of the Straw Hat crew, and there was some context with regards to his existence of the Straw Hat crew. And Oden basically stated specifically that he helped Old Roger in order to search the world for One Piece in the New World, because that's where One Piece was supposed to be in the New World. Um, so eventually, Gold Roger found One Piece, and I believe Oden also was with him when he found One Piece. And then when Oden went back to his hometown, because he was the ruling king at the time in his hometown, and went back to his queen and his children under the queen, his prince, Kaido had showed up, and Kaido had um, destroyed his town and sabotaged Gold Roger's ship, assuming that Gold Roger died in the process. And eventually, Kaido, having a powerful devil fruit, the dragon fruit, took down Oden, not with ease, but with some difficulty, but was able to eventually defeat him um, with a small amount of stress. Not enough to kill Kaido whatsoever, but enough for Kaido to defeat Oden far easy. And I guess you could say that if Luffy was to fight Lucci, um, that's how it would feel. But no, not even. Because Lucci actually put up a fight against Luffy, or Luffy actually put up a fight against Lucci. It would be like Luffy fighting Don Kreese. So, yeah, let's say Oden is Don Kreese and Luffy is Kaido. Don Kreese had no shot against Luffy once he started to use his Gum Gum powers. So Oden had no chance in defeating Kaido because his Devil Fruit was more powerful. Moving on from that, we go into the next section. We see a guy. I forgot his name. What is his name? I'm not going to try to remember it. Moving on from that, we see the next image, and the next image represents the princess, or the queen of the country, the empress, um, getting killed in the process and dying. Moving on from that, we get to see a representative that served on the Kaido, kind of a saboteur that was part of the original crew that was served under Oden, his men, and served his men for years from since he was young. Turns out he was a bad guy. Moving on from that, he sabotaged people, set them up, and eventually led to the deaths of many people who served Oden. Moving on from that, we get to see that Kaido himself uh, went into alliance with Big Mama, which is another emperor. There are four emperors. He allied with one of the emperors in order to make sure his power stay where it is. So during this battle within the New World, Luffy and the crew has to fight two emperors. One on using the crew of the Straw Hat in order to fight Big Mama, while Luffy himself fight Kaido individually. So yeah, Zoro, Sachi, Nami, Usopp, they all fight Big Mama, while uh, Luffy himself fights Kaido. So moving on from that, we got to learn of more of the dragon fruit, um, called dragon fruit, ancient type Spinosaurus model. This is one of the people called Page that serve under Kaido. And moving on from that, we get to learn that Luffy is excelling past the level of where he's supposed to be in Gear 4. We learn of this because we learn that in the New World, there's something called, what's the name? Conqueror's Spirit. And Conqueror's Spirit is the description of one's internal life energy, life force, expel outwards in order to control everything around it. And the Conqueror Spirit is something that's you have to be born with. It's something that's passed down from generation to generation. It's not something that you could learn. It's something only a handful of people can have. You could have various different conqueror powers, and that allows you to lead others. But only the Conqueror Spirit can be inherited by DNA or so, passed on from DNA. It can only be developed in a person by either willpower or passed on by DNA inheritance. So this cannot be something you learn. It has to be something that's manifested in you based on your will. So you have to have will of basically a god in order to attempt to have Conqueror Spirit. So if you don't have the willpower of a god, you cannot create Conqueror Spirit. So when Luffy develops the Conqueror Spirit, he's able to develop a great amount of chi power equal to the power of dragons. In fact, it excels past lower level dragons such as Page here. And so they get incredibly fearful of this character and realize that his power, if left unchecked, would exceed that of the Emperor Kaido himself, which is obvious because Luffy's gum gum fruit, which is devil fruit, is not fully defined to have a description of what it is and why it behaves the way it does, or where it originally came from. So moving on from that, we get to learn of a character that kidnaps Luffy in order to save him from near death by the minions that served under his personal bodyguards that served under Kaido, who are sent to destroy Luffy. And this character is another one I'm not going to try to remember because the story is not about them. The story is about Straw Hat, Luffy, Kaido, and essential characters. I think I somewhat remember her name, but this is a she. It passed as a he, or maybe it's more like a them. If I remember clearly that this character, let me see if I remember. This character is the daughter or slash son of Kaido, but it's not really the daughter or son of Kaido. This character is, or maybe she really is. I'm not going to even go into it. So what happened is Luffy and the crew goes to save the son of Oden, Minamoto, from certain death at the hands of Kaido. And Minamoto is actually the son of Oden. And the person that served Minamoto, the son of Oden, is Kaimon. And that's his name. That was the name of the guy I was trying to remember, Kaimon. And Kaimon basically was an assistant towards Oden when he was alive, in order to help his son grow to become strong and powerful to take over his empire once he was old or done with. This was before Kaido. So Minamoto eventually gets captured by Kaido, strung up by Kaido, and was eventually going to be executed by Kaido if Luffy didn't crash the party. So Luffy crashed the party with the Straw Hat crew. They take on more of Kaido's minions, his personal bodyguards, defeat them in the process, including Caesar, who was the person who used to serve under a Flamingo, because Caesar was Flamingo's mini dictator that wanted to take out Luffy and Smoker, but Law fooled them. And so Luffy, on his way in order to save Minamoto with the help of Kaimon, get into a final battle, or should I say, get into a mini battle against. No, get into the final battle against Kaido, while Zoro gets into a mini battle against one of Kaido's personal bodyguards. He takes him out eventually, and last thing we see before the final battle of episode 1070 or something like that, 1070, 1071, the battle between Luffy and Kaido, we see the CP9 unit, or should I say CP0 unit, talking to a member of the world government, or the head of the CP0 unit, stating that the 5 elders want Luffy to be killed, because if Luffy kills the Emperor, if Luffy kills Kaido, or if Luffy keeps fighting Kaido, here's the thing, I believe they say if Luffy keeps fighting Kaido, eventually it might trigger him to go into an even more powerful gear, for which they're not sure what that gear could be, because they obviously know that the Gum Gum Fruit have secret abilities, and those secret abilities are far dangerous. In fact, I believe in the manga, the world government, or the 5 elders of the government, basically said for 800, no, not 500, for 800 years, they've been trying to get the 5 elders. For 800 years, they've been trying to get the devil fruit that Luffy ate. And for 800 years, that devil fruit, the Gum Gum fruit that Luffy ate in episode 1 of One Piece, for 800 years, that fruit has evaded their grasp, as if it had a mind of its own. So when I first started this video 3 hours back, I said that this thing possibly had a mind of its own. The Gum Gum fruit possibly had a mind of its own. That it possibly lured Luffy, or wanted Luffy to find it, or wanted Luffy to eat it. That it possibly opened the box itself. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but after what the 5 elders said about the fruit itself, it's starting to, I guess, past episode 170, it's starting to seem that that was the case, or that what I believed with regards to the fruit being like it has a mind of its own, and it wants to find someone on the same level of thinking. That that fruit could have only been attained by Luffy, by no one else. That fruit would eventually evade everybody else. Even if Shanks was to open the box and try to consume the fruit, something would allow an event to happen in that bar for Shanks not to eat that fruit, or allow for Shanks not to be able to open that box. That Gum Gum fruit wanted Luffy to find it. So moving on from that, we get to finally learn, past the 1070 episode of One Piece, that one of the 5 elders, and I said this before, that the elders are pretending to not know why this fruit, why Luffy is so important after he defeated Crocodile some 100, during episode 100, or episode 100 and something before 200 episode, real early in One Piece lore, why they were so desperate to capture Luffy. And it had nothing to do with him becoming a warlord. It had nothing to do with him being the king of pirates. It was all about the fruit's evolution, about an unstoppable force being awakened. And so the name of this fruit was labeled under code name Zoan, Zoan. And the identifier for this fruit label was called the human fruit. Um, it's only in One Piece lore that the pirates call it the Gum Gum fruit, or Luffy call it the Gum Gum fruit. But the world government, the five elders, called it the human fruit, labeled as Zoan. And the human fruit, as they say, and it's important, um, and we see here, as he's dead on a person's deathbed, permanent deathbed, not about to die, not near death, not half dead, like permanent death. Upon Luffy's ultimate death, upon when Kaido finally kills Luffy, he evolved, and he evolved to the next level. And this evolution is called Nico, the god of the sun. So this is said to be Nika, god of the sun, or Nika fashioned from the god of the sun. Um, whether this is related to real world events, or whether this is completely fictitious and it doesn't exist, I don't know. But I do know that in this lore, um, Nika, the god of the sun, is associated with this fruit, and it could be that this god in this universe created this fruit from its personal essence in order to keep itself alive or to spread its existence, to manifest in various different forms, as in someone manifesting into a wolf, but it's actually that person himself, or into a bat, or into anything or any object. That Nika is very much alive within that fruit itself. And so once Luffy consumed it, it was something that was intended for him to consume by this god. So, and here's the thing, the only way for the powers of this god to fully be initiated is only on death of this person and the revival of this person like a phoenix. So once Luffy excelled past certain gears and got to the level of complete death and complete revival from death, was the existence of the power of this god able to come about. Nika. So moving on from there, we get to finally get into episode 1071. I believe it was episode 1071 where the fifth gear, where Nika first popped up, or the existence of Nika was first present. Um, and this is supposed to be represented by the deity, by the god Nika, or the powers of the god Nika within Luffy himself. So this was the god that first created the Gum Gum fruit, or the human fruit. And this god was able to bend everything to its will, literally. Bend objects, bend the sky, bend anything to its will, and turn it into a weapon. And moving forward from that, we now go into the final episode, episode 1073. And I think I'll leave it here, because the next image is of Naruto. That will be for another day. This has been a long video, and this is a long journey. But eventually, that is One Piece in a nutshell. And what do I think of this? This is great. This is how you build a story. This is how you develop characters. This is how you create an arc. This is how you make things become greater than they are. So you put it in a step process. You start from the beginning. You get to a middle point. You amp up the power, amp up the watt, amp up the story, amp up the crew members, amp up the camaraderie. And then you get to the next level, the next wattage. And you amp those up even further and make those stronger and more powerful as you go along. And that's the great part of One Piece compared to other anime. It has never deviated from pumping up the power to make things more interesting. When the story of One Piece becomes too serious, it makes it more lighthearted. When it becomes too lighthearted, it makes it more serious. When it becomes too silly, it starts to ground things more so that it could come back onto the earth. Once it becomes too grounded and not silly enough, it goes even further within the silliness. The power of Nika is very much Looney Tunes power. It's basically if Bugs Bunny was to pop up inside of Luffy and start to do things that made no sense whatsoever. Anvil falling on top of people and people not dying. People being able to stretch their arms beyond certain limits is one thing. But people able to do things Looney Tunes styles where eyes are popping out of their heads while bodies are transforming into objects. He's now able to do anything with his body and use anything around him at his disposal. Like if he was to run on the ground would start moving around him like it was something from Sonic the Hedgehog. So everything that this power of this god have now been awakened within Luffy. In the anime, it basically says that he's reached peak potential of his gears. Gear 5 is the peak powers of his gears because he's finally unlocked the power of this god in order to use this god's power. This might be the truth. This might be the final gear. Gear 5 is probably the final gear of his fruit powers. That everything that comes after this power might be associated with combination of other people's power, but the final form of his Gum Gum power might be the power to use the power of the god Nika. So that said, this is the end of One Piece and the journey of One Piece and everything from episode 1 to episode 100 to episode 200, 304, all the way to episode 1000 to the journey, all the way from Crocodile's arc to Lucci's arc to Nami's to Whitebeard's and Ace's to Flamingos, all the way to the ocean depths, all the way to the lands of the New World, to Kaido, to the story of Law, Skypiea. Everything has led to this moment to unlock Luffy to his 5th gear and to tell the final secrets, or should I say not the final secrets, but the secret long hidden with regards to the Gum Gum fruit has now been finally revealed. That the Gum Gum fruit comes from a god, and this god is the god of converting anything at his will, to bend it to his will. The god of rubber, or should I say the god of transforming anything that he touches into shaping it into what it wants to shape it to. It doesn't necessarily have to be rubber, but the god of bending things like rubber to its will and using it as its own powers. So yes, from the very beginning, from episode 1, Luffy has been holding the power of a god within him. The Emperor's Spirit, I'm assuming that Luffy always had the power of the Emperor's Spirit, the willpower of an emperor within him, is the reason why the Gum Gum fruit allowed for him to accept it. That the Gum Gum fruit could have only been accepted by someone who have the power of an emperor, or the power of a conqueror. The power of a conqueror within him. Because the emperor is one thing, but you have to have the power of a conqueror to conquer anything, heaven and earth, in order to allow for a god to even accept you. So that's the context with regards to a revelation of the Gum Gum fruit within the One Piece journey. So we're now here, and moving forward, there are going to be more episodes of One Piece anime and of the manga. So that's it for this video. This is why I say One Piece can either be the #1 anime of all time or fall into #2 anime of all time. Many people died in One Piece, but many people got just knocked out and put in prison in One Piece. Many things were serious in One Piece, but many things were goofy as hell in One Piece. This is an anime that can literally be the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen, but it has so much heart to it and brotherhood, camaraderie to it. It's easily the most camaraderie anime, brotherhood anime. Family not family friendly anime, but family associated anime of all times. That is the reason why it's existed for so long. It checks off all the boxes quite easily. You want this anime to be ridiculous? Check. You want this anime to be serious? Check. You want this anime to have people dying? Check. You want this anime to have no one dying, or some people not dying? Check. You want this anime to be taken lightly? Check. You want this anime to be taken seriously? Check. You want this anime to have funny people? Check. You want this anime to have nightmarish people? Check. You want this anime to have sexualized themes? Check. You want this anime to have non-sexualized themes? Check. You want this anime to have political ideologies and ridiculous philosophies in it? Check. This anime has had everything that every anime in existence has had. The only thing this anime does not have is the dark nature of anime that many animes meant for only a specific type of age can have. This anime can never be meant for only 18 and above because it's not designed to be that way. So this anime can only lose on two fronts: blood and violence, and the extreme nature of indulgence in certain things. So just those two things. Everything else this anime has had. So why is it in the top 5, or why is it not the one? Like I said, it's for those two things. That's the reason why that is. Other than that, this is a perfect anime. If you want to skip by certain episodes, if you want to skip over certain arcs, you can. If you want to go straight into the meat of the anime, you can. If you want to stay on course and watch every single arc, even the fillers, you can. This is an anime that could be either something that you're into or something that you want to skip over because it's completely ridiculous. But you cannot deny, no matter how ridiculous it is, it has a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood that's beyond any anime, even those of Dragon Ball Z. And I believe Dragon Ball Z has the biggest, most camaraderie type brotherhood, even equal to that of Hunter x Hunter. But I believe that this is more family. This is more of a family brotherhood than a brotherhood. And that's why people connect to it more. It's not just about superpowers and about ridiculous actions, but it's more, these people are more family. It feels more like a family than Hunter x Hunter does. Even though Hunter x Hunter feels also like a family as well. It's very hard for me to define this crew as a family equal to that of Hunter x Hunter. But at the same time, I can. So, yeah, if you want this to be your #1 anime of all time, that's correct. If you want this anime to be your #2 anime of all time, that's also correct. If you want this anime to be your #3 anime of all time, that's also correct. But never forget that if this falls in the 4th and 5th of your top 5, you would have to give reasons for why that is. Because other than the goofy stuff, this does not belong in a 4th or 5th place. Not at all. This is something that you would have to see from beginning, middle, and end to finally say, oh, yeah, you're completely right. It would have to be something important for why you would have this in the 4th and 5th place. And even if you do find something important, One Piece will always be in the top 5. It will be hard for One Piece not to be in the top 5. And if anyone ever not have One Piece in your top 5, you would have to question that person. Why are you even into anime if you don't really understand anime? That's the first thing you will have to question. If you don't have One Piece in your top 5, you would have to assume that this person is pretending to be into anime. Because it's impossible for One Piece to not be in the top 5. I could see One Piece not being in someone's top 3, but not being in someone's top 5. I cannot see that. Not for the life of me. You would have to be someone who really doesn't like anime that's even ridiculous. You would have to be a person that like anime that are totally grounded. That's all. And if an anime is totally grounded, it's only limited to one fraction of what anime is. A total anime is different slice of a pie. All of them have to be together. If you cut off half of that pie because you only want this amount of anime to be considered the greatest of all time, then you will always be on the side of the fence. And your ideas of what you believe are the greatest of all time will always be just your idea. But when you look into the factor based on what everyone thinks and factor majority over minority, you would always lose. It's just that simple. It doesn't matter if 100 of you fight against 1,000 of you, the 1,000 will always win because they are more than 1,000 versus 100. It's not about what you believe is right. It's simply based on numbers. Who will survive at the end based on the amount of numbers? If the amount of people believe in One Piece to be greater than everybody else, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Based on tallying numbers, it will always go to One Piece's favor, regardless. Now, what's right and wrong is not based on numbers. That's completely ridiculous. What's right and wrong is based on simply content and what's presented. You not willing to accept something is simply a personality thing, a human thing. That's why when you do anything, you have to put your human ideas and your belief at the background and then include it thereafter. If you put your human beliefs in the foreground, you will always be conceited. You will always be full of yourself. You will always be me first and everyone else after. And these people have been like this wherever they are in the world, whichever type of anime they're watching or any type of content that they're doing. These people will always exist in the world. So if anyone does not have a One Piece in your top 5, you must question whether that person is really an anime lover or not. Like, truly, I must say this. If someone does not have One Piece in their top 5, you must question whether they are really an anime lover or not. Because One Piece is not only the longest running anime in the history of Japan, it's also the longest running anime on television. And that doesn't happen simply because fans want it to happen. There's something more that's going on, more than this business, more than this greed. When something goes past 1,000 episodes and it still exists, it's generally around greed, but it's more than just fandom and greed. There's something more. It's a life and a bloodhood and a survivability that and an emphasis of purpose, a type of, I guess, a type of meaning to a loyalty. It's a type of loyalty that doesn't end with a culture. It's a type of loyalty that goes on from generation to generation. One Piece is the only anime I know that has this type of loyalty. That goes on from generation to generation. It's like people listening to the Beatles and pass it on to their children and to their children's children and to their children's children's children. It doesn't end simply because the Beatles are done. It goes on and it goes on forever. So if someone doesn't have it in their top 5, it doesn't matter if people in the future, 20 or 30 years down the road, listen to music that are beyond, or watch anime, or develop movies, or create clothes that are beyond that of the people from the past. You know, a leather jacket is still going to be awesome regardless of what time it exists in. It's going to be classic. One Piece is always going to be in the top 5. It doesn't matter if someone make a superior anime greater than it. It will always be in the top 5 simply because it was that legendary. Its status lays within the foundation of its legacy, not within how its content of its story existing, or of what it is right now as it exists. Long after One Piece is dead, it's still going to be in that top 5. Long after, like 10, 20 years down the road, when people don't watch it anymore, it's going to be that thing that's still going to be there. And it will take a hell of a lot more than something greater than it is in order to knock it out at that top 5 slot. Because I believe people are loyal. The only time something drops out of a top 5 spot is because the generation that replaced the previous generation wait for, those people who used to believe and fans of that thing to die out. And once that thing dies out to a vast amount of level, it will require decades for that to happen. So One Piece is going to be in that top 5 for maybe the next 10 years or 20 years until something is superior comes by it. Maybe Jujutsu Kaisen and maybe My Hero Academia becomes so much more great and powerful in the next 5 to 10 years that One Piece is no longer even considered to be an anime people are going to watch or read anymore. But as long as they keep making the manga, and as long as the manga keep existing, One Piece is never going to go away. It's always going to be in the top 5. I would gamble on, well, actually I don't gamble, but I would guess in maybe the next 5 years, possibly the next 5 years, 5 or 10 years, One Piece might fall out of that top 5 slot in the next 5 years, at bare minimum, at maximum 10. But for right now, it's still in that top 5 slot. So top 5 greatest animes of all time is not limited to a decade or a generation. It goes on beyond the generation of your father and your father's father. So as long as this existed, this came out in early 2000, I believe, for one decade to the next decade to the next decade. This manga has been out for quite some time, for more than 30 years. So as long as it exists from one decade to the next generation, it will always be in that top 5 slot. And only when people don't want to read One Piece anymore will it not be in the top 5 slot. So that's it for this video. It's been a long one, and you could have One Piece as your number 1, but I have this as my number 2 because it goes back and forth with me and One Piece. Every now and again, it's my number 1, but for right now, it's my number 2 for 2023.